Blog Talk Radio.
923, I'll give you a corrected address, but we do have a fire in a one-story ordinary. Looks like it's about 40 by 120, 125. We'll get to traffic control. Squad 5, Squad 5. And go to 273, 273. And go Battalion 18, 18th Battalion. Go to 273, 273.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tom Merrill, and I want to welcome you to Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio and tonight's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, where we continue to examine issues and challenges faced by our volunteer firefighters today and try to remind all of our listeners that being a professional firefighter absolutely has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with attitude and appearance and commitment and dedication, and I'm sure most of you listening in tonight share that sentiment and work with me every day to try and convey that message. And I want to thank you for joining us. Tonight is March 29th, 2016, and again, I'm Tom Merrill, and again, like to welcome you, and if you'd like to call in today, I'd like to give the number several times just to try and get you to get the courage to give us a call and talk to us about what's on your mind, and that number is 760-454-8852, and we'd love to hear from you. And you know, I'm a pretty passionate guy when it comes to the fire service, and that's what got me to put my presentation together in the first place and reach out to fire engineering about this professional volunteer fire service, and I've been fortunate to be asked to bring it out and talk to people, and I've been doing it more and more, and I'm finding out that there are so many great volunteer firefighters out there, so many great volunteer fire organizations, and so many great firefighters, too, who share that same passion and share that same belief, and by working together, we can certainly get that message out, and I'm going to be on the road this weekend, as a matter of fact, in the great Ulster County, New York area, which is just south of Albany. The good folks there have invited me in to come and bring them my presentation, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll be going to FDIC in a few weeks. As a reminder, the great FDIC convention coming up in Indianapolis, April 18th through 23rd, and that is the premier fire service convention in the world, no doubt about it. And I'm, again, glad to be part of that. Great folks at Fire Engineering, Chief Bobby Halton and his crew has, again, invited me back, along with so many other fantastic people, to deliver our presentations. And I'll be doing mine on Tuesday from 8 till noon. And if you happen to be going to FDIC and are around on that Tuesday, I'd encourage you to come in and sit in on my class. I'd love to meet you, love to talk to you, and love to share with you the great story of the American Volunteer Fire Service and national and worldwide volunteer fire service. And also going to be going to Dallas, I think, in early June to the National Volunteer Fire Council's convention. They have a training council summit in early June in Dallas, and I'll be heading there to deliver that message as well and work with those great folks. That is a absolutely great organization. And if you'd like to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, either my personal page, which is Tom Merrill. I have no problem with friend requests there. Or there's a Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page that I put together to share stories that are of interest to us in the fire service. And feel free to reach out to me. I'm also on Twitter, and you can email me. It's tamerrill63@AOL.com, and I'd love to hear from you. And we could talk about all things fire service related, because every day there's so many good things to talk about, so many things of concern, and so many stories to share and to get out there. And I love talking to everybody. So feel free to reach out to me and tell me what's going on in your department and in your area. And speaking of events going on, as you know, I always like to take a few minutes just to talk about current events in the fire service, and in particular the volunteer fire service. And I'm going to start off, though, it's actually not paid fire service related, not volunteer fire service related, but just another reminder of the importance of something we were talking about a couple shows ago, and that's implementing and reinforcing good programs in our department when it comes to driving and driving safely and trying to cut down on line of duty deaths and injuries associated with driving. And we were just reminded of that, unfortunately, a couple times over the last month. In one instance, we had a firefighter in Oklahoma get run over by a brush truck. He's alive, although he was in critical condition at the time of the incident back, I think it was the end of February. He was accidentally run over by a brush truck in Oklahoma, and it's just a tragic reminder of the importance of trying to have spotters on vehicles when they're backing up, or if the truck wasn't backing up, to just try and always be driving carefully and watching out for firefighters, especially at incidents when sometimes we get a little excited and we're more in a hurry to get moving quickly because we're trying to get some things done. And unfortunately, we had a terrible, tragic reminder of the importance of trying to have spotters and good driving policies in place and reinforced. Just last week, I believe it was in South Carolina, we lost a brother firefighter, just a horrific line-of-duty death, and our hearts go out to him or to the family out there, and to his family, and to the brother and sister firefighters in the fire service out in South Carolina. Tragic reminder again of something we did talk about a few shows ago with Mike Wilbur, the importance of putting good driver training policies in place and reviewing them from time to time and reminding our members and reinforcing them. And heck, we had a fire just in my town a month ago, and the same situation developed where there was a garage fire, heavy smoke pouring across the road. We were coming in on mutual aid, and our orders were to back in and feed a pumper that was already there. And we turned and were then told to stop. We did not need to back up, that the pumper already had a feed. So our engine stopped, and there was a lot of smoke drifting across the road, and one of our firefighters was behind our pumper and saw it stop, and he jumped up onto the tailboard to grab a tool, and our driver never knew that he was on that tool board. I did from my vantage point, and I was prepared to tell that driver if he put it in reverse to stop. But what I was reminded of there is we were in an excited situation, early stages of the fire, and had our driver decided to throw it in reverse, not saying anything would have happened to that firefighter who jumped onto the tailboard, but what I'm saying is the driver never knew he even did that. And I talked to the young firefighter afterwards about what he was doing, and when I pointed out that the driver didn't know that he had jumped onto the tailboard, he said he never even thought of it. He just assumed that the driver did see him or the driver would see him, and what it reminded us all is that sometimes we get tunnel vision. And it's just an important reminder, another good SOP to not only have, but to review, to reinforce, and to practice. And unfortunately, a couple tragedies over the last month, one a terrible line-of-duty death, the other a terrible line-of-duty injury, but a reminder of how dangerous our job is. And you know what? In these cases, and as all cases, the fire didn't know if they were volunteer firefighters or career firefighters. It didn't make a difference. The job was just as dangerous. So a reminder there to always, always be careful. Other information and news in the Great Fire Service is grants are still out there. There's an application opening on Monday, April 4th, which is next Monday. It's the Fire Prevention and Safety Grants, and that is a program that is part of FEMA's Assistance to Firefighters Grants. There's a little nuance to it this year. There's a new option where firefighters can apply for a micro grant, which is $25,000, and lots of information on this grant on the FEMA website, FEMA.gov. But again, it's a Fire Prevention and Safety Grant, part of the FEMA Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program, and the application period is opening Monday, April 4th. So, again, more information available on FEMA.gov regarding that. Here's a situation that I think we all run into, even in our volunteer companies, even in our smaller volunteer companies, but I think all companies face this. And it's the problem, if you can call it problem, but it's the situation of the frequent flyer, the person who calls over and over again for assistance, and in many cases it's not life or death assistance they need, but they just have nobody else to call. I'm talking about those lift assist calls or the assist from the chair to the bed. And I know working at fire dispatch, we get calls like this quite frequently, and a lot of areas are starting to address it and figure out other solutions to help these people, and in some cases they can refer them to social services and other people that can help them. But there's also areas that are starting to place a fee on these people for non-emergency runs. In one area in Maine, they're starting to do that. That proposal is after, I think it's between 4 and 8 times, people would start being charged $25 to handle those calls, and then after that, jump to $125 per call. It's just one idea to try and get people to cut down. The fire chief mentions, and I've witnessed this in my job as a dispatcher, that there's many institutions, many homes, many nursing homes, many retirement homes, many assisted living homes, where the facilities have a no-lift policy in place, which bars their employees from picking people up and helping them if they're having trouble moving from one spot to another. So their next step is to call 911 to request emergency help. And as firefighters, we always want to go and help. We do want to do the right thing. But in some cases, it's over for the same person 100 times a year. There's statistics on that. So the thinking is something has to be done. And this fee isn't designed to drive revenue. It's just to try and get people to look at other options, other alternatives. And I think you're starting to see more and more of that. And it'd be interesting to hear if anybody has any take on that. Feel free to reach out to me and share your stories of success stories and maybe some struggles as you've worked to deal with those types of situations. And in the great New York State, we've got our government interfering in a long-time tradition. There's a law on the books that nobody really knew about that is affecting a company's long-time carnival that's been going on for over 70 years. They do a raffle, and they actually buy a nice vintage car and raffle it off, and they raise quite a bit of money doing that, and they have for many, many years. But what they didn't realize is there's a law on the books that with the license they get to have the raffle does not allow them to sell these tickets outside of their county. And it's costing them many, many dollars in sales. And they have bought a $90,000 1965 Corvette to raffle off, and they may have trouble now even breaking even for that. And it's a sad story. It's a law that's been on the books for a while, I guess they say, but the raffle dates back to 1954. It's a long-standing tradition in this volunteer fire company in New York, and they're seriously considering whether they're even going to be able to do it anymore because of this law being pointed out to them. And it's going to affect not just this company, but others in our state as well. And I'm going to keep an eye on that to see what happens with that. But again, a long-standing tradition, the firefighter raffle, firefighter field day, has been going on since 1945, is in jeopardy of continuing because of a law that prevents them from selling raffle tickets outside of their county. And so those $1 raffle tickets certainly add up, and this law could certainly affect this poor fire company's ability to fundraise, and they use that money for much-needed equipment and help their operation along. And we're going to watch that. We'll see what that leads to. Hey, did you hear about OSHA issuing some guidelines, or contemplating new guidelines, contemplating new regulations that are aimed specifically at firefighters? I saw something last week that came out that OSHA is now looking at mandating medical exams to help address the cardiac risk, which is great. I think we all agree with that, and I've said that before. We actually did a show on that as well. We can't do enough for our firefighters to properly prepare them and give them the medical exams that they should have, and to evaluate them for cardiac risk, since it is such a prevalent cause of death in our industry. But OSHA is now actually thinking about mandating these medical exams, which is great. I know it's recommended by NFPA anyway, but they're also recommending that we do away with fire poles in fire stations, because there's a lot of injuries from people sliding down these poles, hitting the bottom too hard. So they're talking about mandating no more fire poles, and I know that draws a lot of response, and I agree with several and that I've heard rebut that, saying, how about if we mandate we give all our firefighters a radio? How about if we mandate we give our firefighters good, up-to-date breathing apparatus? How about if we mandate driver training programs and annual inspections on our apparatus before we worry about people sliding down a pole and injuring their leg or ankle, which, of course, there's been some bad injuries. I get it. But, again, I tend to agree with these people who are responding to this by saying, let's mandate some other. There's a lot of good we can do for the fire service if we're going to start mandating and giving recommendations. And I tend to agree with that, but very interesting, and we'll see how that goes. And also, the caveat to this whole thing, again, just like so many other unfunded government mandates that we deal with in so many aspects of our society, it doesn't address how to fund these medical evaluations. So they may mandate it, but then they'll tell the fire companies, you figure out how to pay for it. Okay, we'll hold a raffle. We can't have a raffle in our department anymore because we can't sell enough tickets because we can't sell them across county boundaries. So very interesting, very interesting. Hey, I talk a lot about the National Volunteer Fire Council. They do a lot of great things. Going to be going to their convention in early June, I mentioned. They do so many good things, and they also sponsor National Volunteer Week, which is coming up in April 10th to the 16th. Is National Volunteer Week, and as a reminder, 69% of our firefighters are volunteers. And when you talk to the average citizen, so many don't even know that. Their studies are showing that 41% of the people that responded to their survey didn't know if their local fire department was a volunteer department or not. And another almost 80% of them didn't even know if they needed new volunteers. So National Volunteer Week is a perfect time to recognize your volunteer fire department and your volunteer firefighter. And there's a lot of great ideas on what you can do to generate public relations and publicity for your department and your members on the National Volunteer Fire Council website. Check it out at nvfc.org. It's a National Volunteer Week. It's coming up in April 10th to the 16th. Great way to get the word out that, hey, you are protecting your community with professional volunteers. And, oh, by the way, we could use a few more members. And, oh, by the way, here's all the professional services we offer. And, oh, by the way, here's all my professional members. Come on up and meet them. So good stuff. They also, the National Volunteer Fire Council also just honored a Junior Firefighter of the Year and also a Lifetime Achievement Award winner, and they're going to be recognized at an awards banquet coming up in Alexandria, Virginia. And the Junior Firefighter of the Year, I would like to give a shout-out to as well, and say that a job well done, and her name is Alexandria French, and she is 16 years old, and it's Brittany French. I apologize. Brittany French, and she's from the Hedgeview, West Virginia 4-H Junior Volunteer Fire Company, and she has won the National Volunteer Fire Council Junior Firefighter of the Year, and she'll be recognized coming up at an awards banquet very soon in Virginia. And the Lifetime Achievement Award winner is a great guy by the name of Donald Snyder. He's the past chief of the Wantagh, New York Volunteer Fire Department, and he was selected through a nationwide nomination process, and he's being recognized for decades upon decades of outstanding service and dedication to the volunteer fire service. And again, he will also be recognized in May in Alexandria, Virginia, when he receives the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Volunteer Fire Council, and that is fantastic, and I would like to pass along my congrats as well to both past Chief Donald Snyder and also Brittany French from the Hedgeville, West Virginia Fire Company. Great job, folks. Great job. And, we hear a lot about volunteer fire companies hurting for members. We hear a lot about volunteer fire companies folding or forming up with combination departments or going completely paid. Well, we still do have volunteer fire companies forming that are 100% volunteer. And I'd like to reach out and congratulate a brand new one that just formed in Kimball, Tennessee. The all-volunteer fire department just formed to serve a mountaintop development in the Kimball, Tennessee area. 14 volunteers have just joined and formed the Jasper Highlands Volunteer Fire Department in Tennessee, and I'd like to welcome them aboard and congratulate them. Job well done, and have a good go of it, and remember to always exemplify the professional volunteer fire service that we talk about on this show. Fantastic. And, hey, speaking of recruiting members, again, the National Volunteer Fire Council always trying to help out. They got a new recruitment tracking tool. Check it out. It's on nvfc.org. It's a recruitment tool, and it allows to track a member from the minute they express interest in joining through the application process until you get them into the department. So no one slips through the cracks. We hear a lot about recruitment and retention of members, and we talked earlier about how a lot of people don't even know that their community is protected by volunteers. Another thing we found out, and I talk about this in my presentation, is sometimes people ask about joining their volunteer fire company. The process is either very long, cumbersome, or unorganized, and nobody reaches out and gets back to interested applicants in a timely manner to either get the process started or to let them know what the process is. And this little tool that the National Volunteer Fire Council has implemented is not bad. It's a really neat little tool for tracking a member from when they first solicit interest in joining through the process, and keeps them informed, keeps you reminded, and I would encourage you to check it out. It's on the National Volunteer Fire Council website. And then when we do get new members, let's remember, or when we are recruiting new members, we have to diversify in our volunteer fire service. There's a lot of potential members out there in the minority community. There's a lot of potential members out there in the female community, and we can reach out and recruit these. Everyone has a role in helping us out. And I'd like to congratulate Allison Larkin. She is up in Prince Edward Island area of Canada. I believe it's the North Rostisco Fire District, and she is the new North Rostisco Fire Chief. And she's also a new mother. She has a 6-month-old child at home, and she was recently elected to the chief of her department, which, again, is up in the Prince Edward Island area of Canada. That is fantastic. I know of several female chiefs in my area, and it's great, and it's something, again, we should reach out to expand our recruitment efforts and diversify much, much more, and we'll have a lot of success with that. We really will. And another recruitment idea is to reach out and offer tax breaks to volunteer firefighters, and Lincoln, Nebraska is doing that. In Nebraska, there's been some proposals to give firefighters a $250 tax credit on their state income tax. It's still in being discussed right now. If it does go into effect, it would begin next year, and it would cost the state a couple million a year, but we're really hoping to push that through. You start seeing that more and more in other states as well. They considered a few years ago a $500 tax credit. That didn't pass. I think $250 is pretty inexpensive, but a nice thank you to all the folks that step forward and volunteer and work hard, and I hope that goes through for them. Of course, we could spend a whole show on recruitment and retention, but anything that our officials, political officials, can do for us would be greatly appreciated. And as if we don't have enough to worry about, back up to Canada, I just happened to catch this a couple of weeks ago, as if we don't have enough to worry about. Edmonton, Alberta, $30,000 worth of firefighting equipment stolen from a volunteer fire company. I think this was back in February. And they lost a generator, their thermal imager camera, some saws, cutters, spreaders, and I haven't heard if they got anything back yet, but it just goes to show you it's a reminder. It's a different world today, and maybe we need to take steps to make sure our buildings are a little more secure when we're out on runs or at all times. I'm not sure what the story is there, if in fact it happened when they were on a run or not, but again, it's something to be aware of. And we got a lot to worry about. And hey, if you would like to call in, again, the number to call in on is 760-454-8852, and I'd like to remind you that we are being sponsored by Right Rescue Systems. Right Rescue Systems is a fantastic organization. They have a great RIT tool, great firefighter rescue tool. I encourage you to go on their website and check it out. I think it only weighs about 6 pounds, and it was originally designed by firefighters to help remove unconscious victims from below grade or in tight spaces, and it's getting a lot of great reviews. I'm looking forward to checking it out this year, actually, at FDIC. I'm hoping they're going to be there so I can check it out, but heard so many good things about it, and they are so kind enough to be sponsoring these fire engineering talk radio shows, and we really appreciate that. And we'll play their commercial in a little bit. You know, we've been very fortunate at the show. They have some really good guests over the last year and a half that I've been doing them, and we've covered a lot of different topics in the volunteer fire service, and we've covered some that have to do with recruitment and retention. We've covered some that have to do with tactics and strategy, and tonight we're going to go back to some tactics and strategy and some firefighting information and something that's near and dear to my heart, which is engine firefighter operations. You know, sometimes you hear over and over again, we don't fight fires anymore, and fires are way down, and it may be true, but we still need to be ready, and we still need to remember that the common denominator in the volunteer, in all fire service for that matter, is we may or may not have a heavy rescue. We may or may not have a ladder. We may or may not have an ambulance or a light rescue, but we all, I would think, have a truck that pumps water, and water still puts the fire out. With all the training I've been to and all the reading I've done and all the classes I've gone to, I'm pretty sure that the common theme is water still puts the fire out. And you know, there are studies showing that fires are still going up, that there are more structure fires in the last few years than there have been in years past. But either way, not going to debate that. What you can't debate is that fire is still the single largest cause of property loss in the United States. As a matter of fact, the property loss from fire alone, it's more than the combined losses from hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, mudslides combined. Over the last decade, fires have caused direct losses of more than $120 billion. That's a B. More than $120 billion in damages and direct losses, plus billions more in related costs. So you know what? Fires still happen. Statistics are showing they still happen quite frequently, more so in the last few years. Stats have shown they've gone up. But the bottom line is we need to be ready. And engine firefighting operations, to me, are an extremely part of the fire service. And I'm so pleased to have with me today an over 30-year veteran of the fire service, currently a lieutenant with the FDNY, serving on Engine 88 in the Bronx, which is in the 7th Division. He's also a longtime volunteer firefighter, started out as a volunteer firefighter, and continues to serve as a volunteer firefighter in his hometown. He's always been on one of the busiest engines in the FDNY. He was a lead hot instructor for both FDIC and FDIC West. He's lectured throughout our country. He's written some great articles on engine firefighting operations. He's also developed the engine company operations course for the Fire Department Training Network. And I could go on, but I'll let him talk about who he is and share his wealth of knowledge with us. And I would like to welcome to the show Lieutenant Tim Klett from the FDNY. Tim, are you with us?
Yeah, I am, Tom. I'm sitting here listening to you. You got me captivated here.
Probably talking too much. I told you I only had a few minutes of things to talk about, and I looked here and I kept you waiting a little longer than I probably should have, and I apologize for that. But thank you so much for coming on board. And before we get into my favorite subject about engine operations and nozzles and hose and things like that, if you wouldn't mind, I like to ask my guests this from time to time, if you wouldn't mind, seeing as you serve in arguably the most well-known fire department in the world, and the biggest, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, but definitely the most well-known, but you also serve as a volunteer firefighter, I would like you to share the sentiment of this show that being professional has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. Do you agree?
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Tom. The funny thing is, most of the classes that I start off, I try to even out the playing field because, like you said, I started out in a larger volunteer fire department in the state of Connecticut, and I always tell them that 2:00 in the morning when local residents pick up the phone and they dial 911, they don't say send the career fireman, they just say send the fireman. So when they're at their worst possible moment, they want professional firefighters. And believe it or not, most volunteer firefighters that I've dealt with are professional firefighters. The minute you get on that truck, you're not a volunteer anymore. You're a professional firefighter, and you're going to conduct yourself accordingly. So I couldn't agree more that that cloak that we have, I guess you'd call it, between the paids and the volunteer. That there's such a huge difference, and I think there's a huge misconception, even within the fire department, about volunteers and how they handle fires and the way they fight fires. I had a guy tell me, a paid fireman in a bigger city, come up to me and said, "Yeah, but the volunteers don't go in." And I think to myself sometimes, like, what universe are some people on? The volunteer fire service fights fires the same way we do in the career fire service. There's no difference.
It's funny you mention that because one of the stories I like to relate is when I first joined my volunteer fire department in 1982, I was a clerk a produce clerk at a local supermarket, and I actually had a customer when she saw that I was wearing that gray pager that we used to wear, that bigger gray bread box sized pager we used to clip to our belt. I think it used to pull my pants halfway down. But anyway, she thought, "Oh, you're now a volunteer firefighter. That's great." And she actually said to me, "Oh, you don't go in and put the fire out, right? The real firefighters do that. You guys just help." And that was the misconception she had. So,
well, I did like what you said though earlier about the national statistics say that fires are down, and I mean I know that they love to say that, and fires are down in the big cities. There's no question about that whatsoever. I mean, when I first went to the FDNY, 26 years ago, we were still quite busy, and it's slowed down. But I don't think fires are down. I think they've migrated, and I think fires have migrated from the big cities to places that never had fires before, and that's the volunteer fire service. Those are the people who are fighting more fires now than they ever have. Christiana, Delaware, a volunteer fire department down in Delaware, incredibly busy, and it's a totally volunteer fire department. Approaching 10,000 runs a year. They had 10 fires in the month of March. So I think fires have migrated out of the big cities. I don't, for a minute, think that they're down. I think they're occurring in places now that they never had fires in before.
Wow, that's a really interesting fact there. I've heard of Christiana. I know they were busy, but I had no idea. Matter of fact, our good friend Mike Lombardo was there, I believe, correct?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. I had no idea they were that busy, so they're catching lots of work. And if you wouldn't mind, if you just spend a minute, take us through your fire service career and what got you to where you are here in FDNY and preaching engine ops.
It's kind of a funny story. My father was a volunteer fireman. He was a cop by profession, but he was a volunteer fireman. And I spent many, many days as a very young child in the firehouse. My two uncles were firefighters. And it's something that I was born into. There's no question in my mind that when I was born, somebody pointed at me and said, "This is what he's going to do," because I could never imagine doing anything else. So I remember when I was 16 asking my father if I could become a junior fireman in the town where we grew up, and as long as I kept my grades up, I could do that. And that was, I'm scared to say it, 1978. When I joined the junior firemen, and then in 1980 I was sworn in as a full-time volunteer fireman in Newington, Connecticut, and I was assigned to Engine 2. And we were a bigger volunteer fire department. We had 4 firehouses. We ran 7 engines, 2 trucks, and a heavy rescue under the umbrella of one chief. So it was a larger volunteer fire department, and we actually did some fires. It wasn't a slower place. So I spent about 6.5 years there and became a paid fireman with the city of New Britain, which is an old New England mill town just outside of Hartford. And I was there for about 4 years. And then in 1990, I went to New York City, and I was assigned to 47 Engine out of Proby School, and did about 2 years there, and transferred up to 69 Engine in Central Harlem. And I stayed there till I got promoted in 1988. I went to Engine 88, I mean.
Oh, wow.
But,
now, Engine 69,
but I've always been on an engine, Tom. Huh?
You're an engine guy.
I've always been on an engine.
Yeah.
And,
now, in 69 Engine, were you there with when Ray McCormick was there?
I was there before Ray McCormick was there.
Okay.
I was there before Ray was there.
Gotcha.
I remember when Ray walked in the door. And you know, and listen, Ray was a truck guy, and he's one guy that really did make the transformation from being a truck fireman to he became a very good engine officer. There's no question about that. I mean, he picked a great place to learn how to be an engine officer. And he made that transformation. Most guys can't do that. They just can't lose that mindset of being a truck fireman and becoming an engine officer where your main goal is water. And he was able to do that. He was able to do that very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, Tim, if you wouldn't mind, I just found it. I stumbled a little bit earlier. I mentioned that we're being sponsored by Wright Rescue Systems, and I've got to air their little ad here. I was supposed to do it at the beginning, and I couldn't find it because I was looking under R for Wright, because they spell it R-I-T-E, and it's under C for commercial. So silly me. But, folks, I'd just like to remind you, you're listening to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. I'm Tom Merrill with my special guest, Lieutenant Tim Klett, and we are going to be talking engine ops, and we're going to talk about the things we should know as volunteer firefighters about how to work the engine and get water on the fire quickly and efficiently as soon as we listen to our sponsor. Thank you so much to Wright Rescue for sponsoring us.
Created and designed by firefighters, a rapid intervention device like no other, used to remove an unconscious firefighter from an IDLH, the Patriot Rat. You can find us at wrightrescuesystems.com.
Thank you so much to Wright Rescue. And if anybody would like to call in, has a question for Lieutenant Klett, myself, or wants to share any of their stories or information, again, feel free at 760-454-8852. And we'd love to hear from you. And Tim, I've said over and over again, I love engine work. I'm a nozzle Nazi. I love nozzles and learning about friction loss and hose, but it is the common denominator in the fire service, as I mentioned earlier, because everything aside, no matter how different our departments may be, the common theme is we have to get water on the fire. And water still puts the fire out no matter what training, slicers, dicers, inside, hit it hard from the yard, however you're doing it, it's still water that puts the fire out. And career, volunteer, it doesn't matter, right?
No, Tom, it doesn't matter. And the funny thing is like the fire services, we've become so technical over the past few years, and we've branched out and in so many different avenues where we provide services to the public. And you get young firemen now, and they're gonna they get monies to take a class and go to school, and they all want to be part of the the high angle underwater bomb squad. But no one signs up to take that engine class because it's a foregone conclusion that, well, we know how to do this. And like you talked about how I got started teaching, it really started when I went to the FDIC, and this along the lines. And Mike had told me that with Mike Lombardo, who I was a co-lead with, he says, you got to come up with a little talk that you give to the engine guys before they go in. So I did it over a couple times over, and I had a kid come up to me and say to me, no one's ever told me those little things to do to make it easier. And I found that being able to advance, operate, and move the nozzle, it was a lot easier by those little things. And that's really how it got its start, to be honest with you. And you couldn't be more right about water on the fire ground, especially, in my mind, in the volunteer fire service. Especially in the volunteer fire service.
Absolutely. And for me, I have to say it was 2001 FDIC. It was in February, I think, that year. And it was the great Andy Fredericks who made an impression on me. I took engine ops. He, I believe, was the lead instructor. I just remember talking to him during a break and just was so impressed with his demeanor and just his friendliness and also his knowledge. And I'm never going to forget him. And he ignited my fire for wanting to be the best engine firefighter I could be and learn as much as I could. He truly was a great man who I think of a lot.
Andy was one of the first guys that really was a back to basics, saying, hey, listen, I know that we're starting to branch out, but, we have these core duties we need to take care of, and there's nothing more than that. I say like the nozzle man, that position alone, it's the purest position in the fire service. It's remained unchanged for the life of the fire service. Nozzles might have changed and hose might have changed, but that position within itself, it takes an educated, determined fireman to push that nozzle in, and it hasn't changed for 100 years. So it really is the purest position in the fire service.
Let's take a look at, before we even get to the fire, for our listeners out there that are sitting in a volunteer firehouse or are going up to their volunteer firehouse tomorrow night or later this week for training, or they're stopping in tomorrow before work or after work, what are some of the things we can be doing ahead of time before that alarm bell even rings to make us a better nozzle or engine firefighter?
Well, the first thing, and everybody says it, is your gear. I mean, if you're going to be leaving your gear in the firehouse, and I think most volunteer fire departments have stopped being the ability to take your car to the fire where you have your gear in your trunk. But even if it's in your trunk, it should be squared away. If it's hanging in the firehouse, your gear should be squared away in the ready position. You shouldn't be fumbling around looking for the things that you use for every fire. Putting that stuff on should be second nature for you. I mean, that's the best drill you can have, just getting dressed. It's funny. We watch. Huh? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I can't agree with you more, and I've mentioned to some of our officers, I said, you want a drill idea? Because sometimes officers, especially newer officers, I always say developing and implementing a good drill really can make you as an officer. It builds you credibility. It shows people that you're interested, you're into it. And I told a couple of my junior officers, I said, you want to plan a good drill? I said, just have a drill practicing putting gear on, sitting in either first outside the pumper, but then get in the pumper with the seatbelt on and practice putting the SCBA on the way to a call. Because since I got out as chief and I'm doing that more, I'm noticing I've struggled from time to time, and I've certainly watched other people struggle, and it can look pretty embarrassing if you're not on top of your game. There's a drill idea right there.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the better drills out there. Just drill on getting dressed and walk around and say, okay, see, why isn't like this? It should be something that's second nature. And I think the second thing that you want to be good with and very confident with is the mask itself, the SCBA. I mean, to me, out of everything we bring, our gear and the SCBA are the only two things that we use that are for us. Everything else we bring with us is for putting out the fire, rescuing people, but we bring that mask and the gear. That's for us. You should be proficient with the SCBA. You want another great drill idea? I actually do it in the firehouse when I get new members. I have them put just the face piece on, and I put them in a dark room. I don't have to black out their face piece. And I just lay out a hose, and I turn on a pass device on an SCBA remote from where the entry point is. And he's got to, just with the face piece on, he's got to follow the hose, get to the pass device, deactivate the pass device, and then the mask assembly that's the pass device is with is totally disassembled. The bottle's not in it. Nothing's in it. He's got to put the bottle and put the mask assembly, everything together, blinded, and then don the mask and then leave. And to me, what that does, it builds confidence in that mask. You shouldn't be thinking on the fire ground, if something goes wrong with my mask, how I'm going to deal with it. You should know that ahead of time. That way we can concentrate on the fire ground itself and not the mask. So that's another great drill to build confidence in the mask. Have them put the mask together, put the bottle in the assembly, screw it on when they can't see. And they're doing everything by feel. And we do that a lot.
Great idea.
Yeah, and that, to me, that's part of being prepared. My sons right now, my two boys who are volunteers also, are right tonight at the firehouse at drill. And I called up and I asked them what they were drilling on, and they were doing some extrication drill. But I tell them when they go down there, if you're going to be hanging around the firehouse, get your gear set up. Get up on the back step and check, just Make sure the nozzle's there. You know, if you're going to be hanging on the firehouse hoping a run comes in, take 2 seconds and just, if you're going to be the guy that wants that nozzle tonight because he's there, make sure it's going to work for you. You know, your tools should be ready at all times.
Absolutely.
Right? And you have to trust that your tools are clean and they're going to work for you, and that you've done what you needed to do ahead of time, whether it's a paid or a volunteer. It really doesn't matter. A tool is a tool. A tool doesn't know the difference, whether it's a paid guy cleaning it or a volunteer guy cleaning it. The tool doesn't know that. It just wants to be clean. You know, and I've seen,
I like to take the guys, too, especially the newer guys, but even veterans, even people like myself, and every now and then, you know, you got time, and this is at every volunteer firehouse, we've all got time to sit in the club room and talk about the problem of the day, but when's the last time you even went out and walked around and opened some compartments to refamiliarize yourself with where everything is? I call it avoid the dog chasing the tail. How many times have you seen where a firefighter's been told to go get a tool, and you see him going and opening every compartment of the rig? Where is that? I knew that Halligan was here somewhere. Avoid that. Again, it's
I call it
almost
something
as
different. I
embarrassing
call it the squirrel in a yard full of acorns. There's one. There's one.
Okay.
There's one. Yeah. He just doesn't know which one to get, you know.
But we've all got time to be up there and hang out, and you know we'll all find problems to complain about. But let's remember the job is there to take seriously, and take 5 minutes and re-familiarize yourself with where the equipment is, and then make sure it's ready to go properly.
Yes, I think that is job one, to be prepared for the next response. And again, you know, we're talking about volunteers here, and to me, I don't make any. I always say, it's like, I don't care what the guys do in the firehouse. I mean, that's really their sanctum. That's really their. If they're going to go play games there all night. But you get on that fire truck and you go out that door, you are, and in the public's eyes you are too, a professional, and you should act accordingly. And that begins with making sure that your gear and your tools and everything is ready to go. I mean, the public sees these things, and all you need to do is go on Statter 911 or any place that posts videos, and you can watch and you can hear people filming, hey, put some water on it. Hey, when are they going to put some water on it? You know, and the public sees what they're the first ones to see when we mess up. And, you know, there are cameras everywhere. And if you think you're going to be able to mess up and somebody's not going to see it, something that shouldn't happen, because we all make mistakes, we all screw up. But if you stretch a line and there isn't a nozzle on it and it's on video, believe me, it'll go viral. You know, make sure that's not going to happen. Make sure that rig's ready to go all the time. If you stop in the firehouse, you're going to spend the afternoon there watching a football game, take 5 minutes and just open a couple compartments and look at the hose bed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'd say, too, going along with being prepared, and I think you talk about this in the class that you taught a few years back from the engine house, or from the firehouse to the fire floor, you talked about pre-planning your district. Have a good idea of, as you're driving around, what's going on in your response area, and don't take it for, you know, don't assume you're never going to go there for the real fire, because it can happen, and you should be, you know, especially if they're remodeling something, be familiar with what's going on there and what the hazards are ahead of time if possible.
Well, and the volunteer fire service is busy enough now because most places have taken on EMS. I know that Montgomery here, where I'm a volunteer, you know, 70% of our runs are EMS. It's a great opportunity to be nosy. Mm-hmm. Be nosy. I mean, people are like, I don't want. No, be nosy. Look around. Find out what's going on. Like I always say in my classes, that everybody has a bad building in their district. You know, they just don't know it. They know it, but they don't realize it. And I ask guys, I said, you ever drive by a building that you say to yourself, boy, I hope I never go to a fire there? Oh, yeah, I got one of those buildings, they say. Well, then that's your bad building. That's the building you should go out and learn as much as you can about. Mm-hmm. If you're that worried about it, you should know everything about. There's an elderly housing complex they built here, and when they built it, we went and looked at it, and we found that the top floor apartments at the end of either hallway can't be reached with our pre-connects. So if we ever had a fire in it, we would come up short every time. So we actually have a dedicated hose bed in the back, a static lay, solely for those apartments. Out of all the buildings we go to, we have a hose bed dedicated to, I think, 6 different apartments. because we went out and pre-planned it, learned what was going on, learned the problem with it, and dedicated a bed off the back of one of the, I think it's the tanker, for that building.
Excellent.
Because we
Excellent. You know,
we're ready for it.
And in what I tell people too, and I talk about this when my class, pre-planning is an important part of the professional equation. And I tell people, you're at an EMS run and you need 3 or 4 of your members to assist the patient, and you get 10. Walk around a little bit, check it out. If you're in an apartment complex, size it up. What's the basement look like? What are there firewalls in the attic? There's so many, and then make it fun for your members. Pull them aside outside and say, hey guys, I know this was a EMS call, or I know this was a food on the stove call, but right now let's just say working fire in apartment number 2 or fire through. What are our strategies? What are our hazards? What are we going to do? What line are we going to pull? You build good habits doing that. I call it what if. In other words, what if it wasn't the chest pain call? What if it was the legitimate fire call at this building? What are we going to do?
Be
I
nosy.
like that. Be nosy, yes. Yeah.
And, like guys have said to me, well, what are we going to walk around every house? And I say, no, I'm not saying that. If you go to a high ranch or a ranch-style house, you don't need to look around that house. You know what that house is. But you go to a downtown apartment building that you've never been in, and just another building we had an EMS run on the 3rd floor. We couldn't figure out how to get up there. There was no stairway to the 3rd floor. We're looking and looking, and so we were getting ready to call back the county and say, listen, this is a false alarm. This isn't occupied. And someone answered the door on the 2nd floor, and she goes, oh, yeah, come this way. And they had a spiral staircase from their apartment to the 3rd floor apartment. Talk about an oddball.
Yeah.
And
wow.
we would have never known that if we hadn't, started looking around and tried knocking on doors. Oh, yeah, it's in here.
Yeah.
And
then
ever known that.
The other important thing, once you find that out, once you make your plans for those buildings, you put the special hose pack together, whatever it is, we got to make sure we communicate that with our members too, because we're all, the nature of the volunteer fire service, people are always coming, people are always going, and we need to make sure we're putting some program in place to get that word out, to tell people about our pre-plans that exist and our procedures for those buildings.
Absolutely. Again, I couldn't agree with you more on that. When you find something that's an oddball or potentially dangerous, and I always say the stuff that I look for is the stuff that's potentially dangerous to me and the people that the other firefighters, because the people in that house are aware of those dangers. They live there. They understand. They know it's there. It's dangerous to us if we don't know that. So it isn't a secret. Let people know. Send out a memo to the adjoining mutual aid companies. Again, in Montgomery, we have automatic mutual aid to the downtown, to the village itself. And, those companies have memos regarding some of our problem buildings in the downtown. It's a very old New York town. I call them little railroad villages. And there's a lot of oddball buildings, a lot of buildings that have been changed. And anything that's out of the ordinary, get that information up there. If you're at an EMS run and it's you who have 4 years and you're not an officer and 2 junior members because that's all who showed up, and you see something, it's going to be incumbent on you to send that up. If you see something, I always say it's like terrorism. If you see something, say something.
Say something.
It's not a secret. Get it out there. You'll never know, and you can't prove the negative. And what I mean is you can never prove that by what you said hurt or didn't, either hurt someone or help someone because now that information's out there. So you can't prove, very, very hard to prove that it didn't hurt or didn't help, but get it out there, get that information up the chain of command, and let them decide, what they're going to throw out there as memos to the other departments and go back and drill on to learn that place as good as you can.
There's that drill word again, absolutely. and Tim, before we get
endless.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people that say they don't know have run out of ideas to train on, no, there's enough. Never run out of ideas on things to train on, that's for sure. And before we get into actually fire on arrival or a working fire, one thing I've noticed that I've seen more and more, and I'd like to get your take on it, is hose bed design and hose bed configuration. Not that a new fire chief or a new fire officer can maybe work wonders and change his hose bed because it is what it is when they ordered the rig. But if you're designing a new rig today, do you got any advice on what we should be looking for? Like, I always thought simpler was better, and one thing I love about the FDNY hose bed, and again, I'm short, and that plays into it a little bit, but I think you'd have to agree, sometimes you see these hose beds that Jolly Green Giant couldn't get the hose off, or if he did, you're climbing up a ladder using one hand holding to the ladder while pulling a nozzle with the other hand. It's unsafe.
Well, you laugh. I think that sometimes some of the design is bound by the manufacturer. I know that Montgomery just ordered 2 new rigs, and we wanted a certain hose bed, and one company couldn't do it for us because of the configuration of their tank. And because where the tank was, it's forcing the hose bed higher up. I couldn't agree with. I look at some of the hose beds now. I'm like, the Jolly Green Giant couldn't reach that. They must be making taller firemen these days because when I got on the FDNY, we had the old Max, and you could stretch from the street. You didn't even have to get on the back step. You could stretch off the back of that rig from the street. Now you have to kind of get up on the back step. It's still a lower hose bed, but I see places that they're so high, and even the Matty Dales or the Crosslades have now begun to get higher up because of the bigger pumps and the bigger pump panels. Everyone wants a super duper gauges, and an NFPA isn't helping. But to me, simpler is better. Get that hose bed lower to the ground, make it more accessible, so I don't have to worry about breaking an ankle getting off the rig. I don't have to be sitting up on the back step, and I heard you talking about a guy, the tragedy where the guy got run over. Where if I'm on that back step and the pump operator or the driver might have to move that rig, he may not be able to see me because I'm too high. It just I couldn't agree that simpler is better. Get that hose bed lower to the ground, make it quicker and easier to get our hose off. I know there's multitudes of different hose loads out there. I like a flat load myself with a couple of loops in it. I think it's the simplest way we can go. I know there's the Minuteman and the triple layer, and there's all, and whatever fits your municipality is fine, but make it simple where guys can get that hose. They shouldn't struggle at the pump. The struggle shouldn't begin until they get to the front door. From the pump or from the rig to the front door really shouldn't be a struggle, and it's become a struggle, and we're seeing an increase in injuries happening around the apparatus simply because of the elevation of the hose bed.
I've seen guys when they're wearing their SCBA and they have to jump up onto a side step or a rear step. The natural weight of the SCBA is pulling them back down to the street, and I've seen people fall because of the weight of the SCBA pulling them back.
Well, I don't know if you realize, though, since the days have gone by of riding the back step, that back step isn't as big as it used to be either. So they're designing a smaller back step where now it's even being used more than previously on the fire ground. Not getting there, but on the fire ground, because you have to get up on that step. And it doesn't accommodate 2 people anymore. It used to accommodate 4 and 5. Now it accommodates maybe 1. And if you got to get up there with a couple of guys to stretch, injuries are likely. They're going to happen.
And Tim, one thing I've always been a fan of is letting firefighters be firefighters. And what I mean by that is I like to establish some basic guidelines for what they should be doing based on the type of incident they're going to, and not be the type, when I was a chief, I didn't want to be a chief on the radio that had to tell them, park here, pull an 1 3/4, or park here, pull a 2 1/2. Oh, it's a car fire. Make sure you pull the 1 3/4 trash line. I believe in whatever the more you can do ahead of time, the better the operation should go. And as an incident commander, then I don't have to sit on the radio basically babysitting my firefighters. Now, of course, you can always, for compelling reasons, get on the radio and change it. But if you can have pre-established park rigs here for your basic bread and butter fire, pull these lines for your basic bread and butter fire, doesn't the operation get off to a better start if you're not having to hold them by the hand the whole way? Isn't there things we can hold them accountable to know ahead of time?
Absolutely, and I always say, especially for like the company level officer in the engine, there's a lot going on when we first get to the fire ground, and I, as a company level officer, shouldn't have to watch all the different goings on, the positioning of the rig, the hooking to the hydrant, or finding a fill site, the stretching. I've got other things I need to take care of, and this gets back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, is it's my company. I drilled on these guys. I trained these guys, so they should be able to do those things. Park the rig here. At this type of occupancy, we need you to move the rig out of the way for the ladder company. But at a one-story ranch, you can park in front of the house or stretch the line here. And this is the hose bed we take for this, and this is the hose bed we take for that. And what those really are, and people don't realize, and I ask this question, do you have any set, when I do my classes, SOPs in your fire department? And most people, what they say? Well, no, we really don't have SOPs. So I said, okay, which hose lay do you stretch for a house fire? He goes, do you always take the same one? He goes, yeah, it's the top one. We always take the top one for a house fire. Well, wouldn't that be an SOP? It's not written. So what my point is that most places do have unwritten SOPs. And when those are in place about when we pull up to a house fire, this is the line. When we pull up to a commercial building, this is the line. When we pull up to car fire, it's the bumper trash line. Whether they're written or not, if that's the way we've been taught and drilled on, they are simply put SOPs. And if we have them in place, things should happen. And I'm a big proponent of that muscle memory mindset, that some things at every fire have to happen. We have to stretch a line. It's a given. For the fire to go out, we're going to have to stretch a line. Those things should be happening out of muscle memory. So if we train our firefighters that, okay, the top Matty Dale is the one for the house fires, whether it's a written SOP or not, it becomes a muscle memory thing. They're jumping off the rig, and they're going right for that. They don't have to think about it. They can worry about other things. They can be making a size up. They can be looking at a building while they're going for it, because just out of that muscle memory, they know this is the one that's coming off. As far as parking the rig, I'm not a big proponent all the time of always leaving the front of the building for the truck. There are engine fires and there are truck fires. I pull up to a one-story ranch. What would you consider an engine fire?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I pull up to a one-story ranch. That's going to be an engine fire. I mean, there's truck work that has to be done, but they do have, and I always joke, in the back of that truck, they got things called portable ladders, and how many times have you seen the ladder company raise their aerial 10 feet and extend it 100 to get the roof of a one-story ranch? Right. I understand you pull up to a bigger building, a 3-story, 4-story building. Yeah, the truck belongs in front. A commercial building, maybe the truck belongs in front. But at a one-story ranch or a place that's really, really off, that's, really going, and I need water on this place quick, and I can use the monitor or the deck gun, yeah, that's going to be an engine fire. I'm taking the front of the building. Find another place to put your fire truck for now. I'm going to get big water on this fire as quickly as I can.
But
those things should be muscle memory.
Right, and we train on it and drill on it, and I'm a big believer in repetition too, and build that muscle memory, because again, and here's the volunteer angle on things. Members don't make it to drill every week. They've got life that gets in the way sometimes, whether it's the demanding job they're working and their spouse is working. They had tickets for the hockey game that drill night, whatever it is. They're not there every week in the firehouse, so they may miss that one drill where they talked about that special hose pack you put together for an apartment complex, or what line you're going to grab for the house fire. So we need to repeat these things. And I'm a big you can't train on the basics enough and review them over and over again. Isn't going to hurt at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
And at
the end of the day, those are the little things when we start talking about a catastrophic event on the fire ground, and when I talk about it's a serious firefighter injury. It's never one big thing. It's a culmination of many little things that go wrong. So the little things, whether you believe it or not, as simply is getting to the door 10 seconds quicker or donning your gear 5 seconds quicker. You start adding up all the time. You're talking a couple minutes you could make up by doing things over and being proficient at it. So the little things especially in what we do in the fire service, the little things do matter. We do have to dot our I's and cross our T's because in the long run it matters. And it matters to us. So the repetition of doing everything at the same time. Go ahead.
No, here's an example of, to me, what a little thing is that works for my department. And sometimes I have this, I talk about this when I'm out talking, and sometimes I think about editing it out because to me it's almost too simple because it works for us. And it's a little thing called a running card. Now, we have a one-department district. I don't know. I'm sure you could set something like this up in districts that have more than one company. But in our district, we have a running card. It was designed in 1960. The minutes show that the wives of the department got together and actually typed out these running cards that we still have today, although they're printed off computer. But every street in the district has a card that the driver pulls, and it tells him the directions to the call. Even if he knows where the street is, which he probably knows where the street is, he still takes the running card and follows that running card to the call. And what that has done for us is allows our incident commander to know what direction the rigs are coming in from. Obviously, they know what order the rigs are coming in on, but we don't run into vehicles coming in all different ways or trying to even if you think you know a shortcut, you're obligated to follow the running card. And that's a little thing that has paid huge dividends for us and has worked really well.
Actually, it's funny you say that because where I was a volunteer in Connecticut, that Newington had them. And I still remember I had forgot that we'd had them until you mentioned it. And there was the Rolodex, there was the hanging rack that you'd have to flip through and pull out the running card for certain streets. And they had the hydrants on, the hydrant locations, how the addresses ran, how to get there. And again, that's a little thing. You drive by a hydrant, you don't know what a hydrant, now I know. It's one less thing I need to worry about when I'm pulling out of quarters. I know the hydrant is going to be at the intersection of Tremont and Church Street because the running card has it there for me. So,
and I know
that's a great example of a great example of a little thing. If he needs to direct an engine to another hydrant, or if the incident commander needs to direct the truck company to get to where he needs placement, he can do it because he knows via the running card, which direction he's coming from. So, again, a great example of a little thing and how it matters.
And you know what I always say about it? You don't have to reboot it. With today's technology, you never have to reboot the running card. It's always there for you.
That's it.
So,
we talk about little things, and not really to jump ahead, but I always say one of the like bleeding the hose line. It's so simple. I always when I do my classes, I say I know it. Here I am, a guy this long in the fire service, and I'm going to talk about bleeding a hose line. We all know how to bleed the hose line. And you want to know the truth of the matter is most people don't. That's the funny thing about it is they think as soon as they get water out of that line, they close in it and it's a bled hose line. And something as simple as just flowing good water, and I tell guys, what are you actually doing? When you flow that good water, what do you think you're doing? And everybody always says, well, we're getting the air out of line. That's why you bleed it. And I'm like, well, whatever floats your boat, to be honest with you. Because even if you didn't bleed the air, and you go to the fire, what follows the air? Water. So it's not going to play a big role on the fire. But if you didn't flow good water and the pumper wasn't actually in pump, or the pump pressure wasn't right, or there was something wrong with the nozzle, or the stream pattern was wrong, and all those other little things that we're doing by that 10-second, 20-second flow of water, we're going to find out when we get into the building that's on fire. So that little thing we do at the front door, something we call bleeding the line, which is in the big scheme of a third alarm fire, the chief is never going to ask you, hey, did you bleed the line at this fire? Is that why the building burned down? But it's a little thing that really has tremendous ramifications if you don't do it right. And at the end, like I tell everybody,
I have a question on that. We use smoothbore straight-tip nozzles in my department, and I think it's hugely important for the nozzle firefighter when he's bleeding the line to coordinate that with the pump operator, the chauffeur, so make sure that the chauffeur is setting his pressure correctly. And if the nozzle firefighter opens and closes it real quick, kind of like a pop top, the old pop top, so and that's it. The nozzle, the
water
pump
hammer
operator
bleed.
Exactly. He can't set his pressure correct. You need that line open flowing water, discharging air, yes, but also so the pump operator can set the correct pressure.
I can give you 15 reasons why to flow good water. That's a big one. Pump pressure. And the pump pressure is going to be just as important with your adjustable fog nozzles. Stream pattern. Clogs. Now, the smooth bore, I can shoot a tennis ball out of it. It doesn't really matter. But they clog, too. I had a fire where the line was bled really quick and shut down. And then when we went in to put the fire out, we had no pressure. And the guy said he was in pumps. But what happened, the guy said he had pressure. He had never put it in pumps. We were getting flow-through water from the hydrant through the pumper in the line.
Wow.
And basically, I sum up with the one big thing, and that's why I say it really is an important thing to do, something so little, because you're really testing the serviceability of your nozzle right there before you go in to fight the fire. You're making sure that tool works. You talk to the guys in the truck company, and when they're going to bring a saw to the roof, the first thing they do in the street is do what? They start that saw up and they run it. They want to make sure it's going to work when they get to the roof. Well, that's what we're doing with our nozzle when we bleed it. We're making sure that when we get to the fire, it's going to work. And that's why that little thing, when we talk about little things, that's a little thing, but it really does mean more than most people think.
Now, what do you do, Tim, when if I'm the pump operator and I have to set the pressure so my nozzle firefighter opens the nozzle? Sometimes at our bread and butter house fires, I'm watching him. I can see him. So I know when he's opened it and I'm seeing the water flow. But what if I can't see him? Then you got to coordinate it via radio, or do you guys have any tricks to the trade for that, or does he just get on the radio and say, I'm flowing water now, set your pressure, or what does he do?
Well, I would hope that most times, because most volunteer companies are dealing with a pre-connected hose line, so most of those pressures should be a set pressure. Now, most of the new rigs come with the pro pressure governors, the presets, and everything else.
Right.
But most times there should be a preset there. And really, when we're calling for water, hopefully that officer is close to the nozzleman at that point. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully he's in the vicinity where he – and, I'm so in tune to the pump pressures now and the sound of the pumper. Even if I'm remote, even if I'm in the apartment or in the building and we get water and I hear him bleed it, I can tell by the sound whether he's got good pressure or not. Just because I'm always listening. And I'll ask. If I don't think I get right on the radio, and I won't ask the nozzle man. I ask the pump operator. I don't even deal with the nozzle man because a lot of times they are so focused on getting in, they're not paying attention to the stream. Do you know what I mean? So that's why more or less I listen a lot. I listen when they bleed it to the sound of it. And if it doesn't sound right to me, I'll get it right on the radio and I'll ask my chauffeur what is he pumping at.
Gotcha.
Just to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
And
when you roll,
go ahead. To be listening all the time. I mean, there's a lot of especially in the engine. And I tell guys at fires, we have to learn to have the ability to see what we hear. A lot of times we can't see it, but we hear it. You're in the fire building and you're in that house, and we just did it in the live burn. I told everybody, close your eyes. What do you hear? And they heard the apparatus. I go, what does that tell you? They had no idea. I'm like, what does the apparatus sound tell you? That they're in pumps? No. It doesn't. It tells you where the front of the building is, doesn't it? So we have to have the ability to see what we hear, even when it comes to our pumping. I mean, everybody's heard a pumper starting to run away from their water, right? I mean, who can say they've never heard that sound? They don't know what it sounds like. I hear it a lot, and I'll right away. Actually, last winter we were at a warehouse fire in Brooklyn, and we're sitting there, we're pumping, and I said to my chauffeur, I go, "You hear that?" He goes, "No," and all of a sudden we started running away from our water. So we got out of the rig, he backed it down a hair, and we went back to idle. We sounded fine again. Got back in the apparatus. And 5 minutes later, I go, "You hear that?" And again, we ran away from our water again. And he goes, "What's doing that?" And I said, without question, we're getting rocks into the screen. And that's exactly what it was. It wasn't one big blockage. It was an accumulation. So as we backed down our pump pressure, we weren't taking in as much water. So we were able, the hydrant was still able to supply us. As more pebbles came up, it blocked off more of the screen, and then we started to run away again. But you can learn by listening. There's a lot to be heard by listening to what you hear, especially when we're charging that line. Yeah, well, I'll tell guys that are listening to the radio show right now, when it gets warmer and your volunteer companies are out there drilling, do that. Bleed a hose line and count how long that line burps and coughs, just the air, not anything else, not a good pressure, not good flow, but when you initially open it up, how long it takes for the air just to get out, how long you hear that nozzle cough before it's a good stream. It's not instantaneously. It's a couple of seconds. It takes a little bit of time. So so your mindset should be like, I should be bleeding a minimum of this time simply because it took this amount of time for the air to get out of that line. And you can do that simply by hearing. You can close your eyes and you can hear that line. And that's what you should do. You close your eyes, listen to the line, I'll open it, and you tell me when you think it's bled. And when the coughing, everyone, okay, when that coughing stops, I heard it, I know it's a bled line.
Gotcha. I'd like to take a second here again and remind our listeners that they're listening to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. I'm Tom Merrill, and this is the Professional Volunteer Fire Department, and we're very thankful to Wright Rescue Systems for sponsoring us, and we're talking with Lieutenant Tim Klett from the FDNY, also a volunteer firefighter, about the importance of engine operations, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Created and designed by firefighters, a rapid intervention device like no other, used to remove an unconscious firefighter from an IDLH, the Patriot RAP. You can find us at WrightRescueSystems.com.
Excellent. Thank you to Wright Rescue Systems. I appreciate them for sponsoring the show. And there is so much still we could talk about, Tim. I hope you just have a few more minutes. I don't want to take you away from anything because I could talk all night on this stuff. But let's get right into the nitty-gritty if we could. The ideal engine crew, the nozzle firefighter, the backup firefighter, the control firefighter, the officer, and could you spend a few minutes? I'm sure you could spend more than a few minutes talking about the different roles and responsibilities. Let's start with that engine firefighter, and I'll start with this question that gets posed to me every now and then. We always beat our firefighters up, our volunteers especially. You always have a tool. Always take a Halligan or an axe. Always have a tool. Is the nozzle firefighter, is his tool the nozzle?
In my opinion, absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely.
That's what I tell people, so I'm glad we shared that.
In my opinion, that's his tool.
How do you...
it's very, very hard for the nozzle firefighter to do everything he needs to do with that nozzle and still drag a Halligan with him. I mean, and even stretching. His focus should be getting line. And here's the thing, and I'm glad you said that, because I tell when we drill in Montgomery, and I help them out a lot, and they drill a lot on this VES and VEIS, laddering and searches, and that's great. And it's information, it's drills that we should definitely without question have. But I do believe that in the volunteer fire service and most volunteer fire departments, not the bigger ones, but like the Montgomerys, the best chance, the best hope that we offer people trapped is to put the fire out. I think that's the best we offer. VES is a very, very dangerous and calculated move, and there's not a lot of volunteer firefighters, and I'm not downplaying this, that I would allow. I told my kids, if I ever catch you trying to do it, I'll punch you in the face. Mm-hmm. It's something that takes, is everybody comfortable doing it? I don't know. I just think, in my perspective, the best that we can offer the people we're sworn to protect is to put the fire out. I think that's the best hope we can give them. And that's a good, aggressive nozzleman and a well-trained engine company. And I think
fire
that by
goes
trying
as
to bring
the
an
first
extra
line goes.
Without question, I think by delaying that line, by trying to control the nozzle and the tool, and again, we talked about those little things. You lose 2 seconds here, 3 seconds here, 5 seconds here, 10 seconds here, and now we're half a minute behind the 8 ball or 45 seconds behind the 8 ball. And we all know that time on the fire ground is really a commodity. And the more we can keep it on our side, the better off we're going to be. We start losing that time value, that commodity on the fire ground. And, anybody that's trapped, chances of survival start to diminish. So, by trying to add an extra evolution to what the nozzle man's already trying to do. I think it will just delay him, and I think without question, absolutely the nozzle is his tool, and it should be pried from his hands. You know, if anybody tries, you got to pry it from his hands. That's his tool. He brings it in, he brings it out. It's as simple as that.
And you bring up one of the great training questions of all time, and one of the scenarios that plays out in a lot of training classes, and that is you pull up and you have somebody at a window. Do you rescue them or do you stretch the line? And you could hear people debate that all day long, I'm sure.
Well, and it is a debatable thing. And, you know, it's one of those decisions that have to be made. And I think that decision, that decision isn't as black and white as people paint it. You know, where's the fire? How much fire is there? You know, how many people on a fire ground do I have? Or is it be me by myself? So it's never black and white. It's never easy. Well, I would do this and I would do that. You know, it's easy to make a fireground decision when there's no life involved. Those decisions are easy. You know, you add that four-letter word of life, and a decision becomes a fireground decision. You know, now you're wagering on someone's well-being. Okay, I'm going to put the fire out first, and if it doesn't go well, you'll take that with you. Or I'm going to go for her, and it doesn't work out well. But that's why you know, good leaders make sound decisions, and they base it on everything they see. So when someone throws a question like that at me, that isn't black, that isn't black and white, I just kind of laugh at it. You know.
Yeah.
But I still believe that, you know, the reports of anybody trapped, the best hope that most volunteer companies offer those people is a good aggressive push in onto the fire. You know, take the fire away from them. Don't take them away from the fire.
And so we've got the nozzle firefighter. He stretches the line. He bleeds the line. And he's making a push on the fire. And we're still teaching them a good arm's length away on the nozzle, right? Keep the nozzle a good arm's length away. It's easier to operate.
That nozzle firefighter, I mean, he's got a tremendous amount of responsibility. It's placed in his lap. I mean, it's his job to stretch the line. It's his job to estimate how much hose should be at the front door. And I always say, you know, if you take the nozzle and the first coupling and lay them on the porch next to each other, you've done that. That's probably the best setup you can do, because I always say it's like a 2-point mechanical advantage. If you take the nozzle and put it on the porch and you start stretching, you're dragging 50 feet of hose. But if you bend that hose in half and put the hose butt on the porch next to you, you're only dragging 25 feet of hose. So it's almost like a 2-point mechanical advantage where we're bringing hose in, but because it's doubled up, you're only dragging 25 feet at a time, not 50 feet of charged hose line. So he's got a lot of responsibility, that nozzle firefighter. You know, all those little things, you know, bleeding the line, setting the line up, getting enough hose there. And I always say that, you know, who do you think calls for water on the fire ground? The officer or the nozzle man? And without question, it's going to be the nozzle firefighter. He's the one who's going to look at the officer and say, hey, I'm ready now for water. And that's
which leads me to my next question, which is another huge debate in the fire service, and I know how we've trained our people, but actually I was just reading an article by the late Tom Brennan regarding this, and that is dry line versus charge line, and the argument is for most house fires, most bread and butter house fires, you do not take the line in dry. You consider the whole house as the fire building, and you don't go into a fire building with a dry line. And I'd like to see what you think about that.
Well, to me, that's a bunt. That's an easy one. And I can give you statistics, but absolutely without question. When we're in a private home, the private home is considered a fire area. We do not take and in the fire service, there are very few times I could say, hey, you should never, ever, ever do that, or you should always do this, because it's not black and white, but this is. This is too much counts on having water, good water, bled hose line before we go in. Not just the people that are trapped, but the people that are going to get those people rely on that line being charged. I don't know if you know about the Cincinnati firefighter, Oscar Armstrong.
No, I don't.
Story and a half cape. Not the nozzle firefighter. Now, he didn't just charge into a house with a dry line. Water was coming, multiple kinks. He entered the house, figuring water was going to show up, and it never did, and the entire first floor flashed over, killing the nozzle firefighter. And it's one of those things that whether you think it's coming or not, when it gets there and that line is bled is when we say, okay, let's go, not before. I am a firm believer that that's one of the always is in the fire service. We always enter the fire area with a charged hose line. You want to roll the dice, you're a gambler, do it the other way.
Too many examples of things going wrong, thinking water was coming, and it wasn't for one reason or another. A lot of little things led up to the problem, and unfortunately in that case it was a very tragic problem. And okay, I'm backing you up. The importance of the backup firefighter, that's an unsung job in the fire service, isn't it?
Certainly is. Right. The nozzle man does the news interview, and the backup fireman is in the back of the ambulance getting oxygen.
Oh, it's like the truckie's getting all the glory for the rescues.
Who needs truckies? But here's the thing about what I always say about the backup fireman, and to me, one of the most important things about that backup firefighter, when he's backing up the nozzle man, he should be thinking like a nozzle man. If he's not, he's never going to do his job the right way. We've all had the nozzle to the fire. So if I'm backing a guy up, I need to anticipate his movements. What would I be doing right now if I was this guy in the nozzle? Okay, I see the room to the left is on fire. I'm preparing to move that line to the right. He doesn't need to tell me because I'm thinking like a nozzle firefighter. The other big thing is we want to support the nozzle firefighter, but we don't want to push him. Too many times you can hear the nozzle firefighter going, whoa, 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 don't. So you want to be a good, solid support, but not push him. And we need to be close enough to the nozzle firefighter where we're not forcing a kink in that line between the nozzle firefighter and the backup firefighter. And, you do a lot of drills, and I see it happen all the time with a nozzle firefighter. And what they do is they try to push the line forward as they're leaning into them. And I say, think of yourself as one entire unit, the nozzle firefighter, the 6 feet of hose that you guys are managing, and the backup fireman. If you think of yourselves as one unit, one thing, you'll never push them too hard, you'll never oversupply them, and you're never going to force a kink between you as the backup fireman and the nozzle firefighter. Because you see a lot of guys...
Tim,
what's that?
I was going to ask you, you bring up a good point that I've noticed, and maybe you can help us out. When we're training, I notice where we have a kink problem, it's right where the nozzle, the back of the end of the nozzle meets the hose. It kinks there, and we're operating a 15, 16 smoothbore tip. And more often than not, that's where our nozzle firefighter gets a kink. Right, the hose bends on them. And it's right where, can you picture what I'm saying? Right at the end of the nozzle, right where it
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. Some of that is under pressure. The line isn't being pumped right because it's a low pressure line anyway. It's only 50 pounds at the tip anyway. So it's very, very conducive to kinking. But what happens is, and what causes that is their hand is moving just the nozzle. And that's why it's kinking there. Are you picturing what I'm saying? So if you said earlier that, we want a foot to a foot and a half of hose between our body and the nozzle. And the only reason we put that there is because that's where the turns are made. But when we manipulate the nozzle, we still have to manipulate the foot to a foot and a half of hose and the nozzle. So if I'm going to whip it around, that foot to a foot and a half of hose is being whipped around with the nozzle. But you'll see guys just take their hand right behind and try to move just the nozzle and not that foot and a half of hose. Am I making any sense?
Yep.
And that's why that kink develops right there. They're just flipping the nozzle around and not the whole line. All right. So but if you think of it as one unit, yes. If you think of the nozzle, the hose, you and the back of them as one unit, and you start moving that whole unit around, you won't get that kink.
Okay.
All right. So think of it as if the first foot of that hose behind the nozzle, foot and a half of hose, was an iron pipe. Okay, and not a cotton jacketed rubber lined hose, but an iron pipe. If you had that, when you whipped it around, you wouldn't have that nozzle flopping around, right? So try to manipulate it the same way as if it was like a cast iron pipe behind that nozzle.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yes, absolutely. And if anyone has any questions for Lieutenant Klett, please, again, the call-in number is 760-454-8852, and this is Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio, and tonight's installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. We're talking all things engine operations, and right now talking about the role of different firefighters on the hose line. And is there anything else of importance for the backup firefighter? I'm thinking like the nozzle firefighter, which comes with training, which comes with getting to know each other and working together and handling some calls together. And what other pieces of advice, if you're a backup firefighter, might you have?
Well, one of the other things is you should always be in the front forward-looking position. I've seen guys that back up the nozzle man, and it feels easier by turning your back and putting your back to the nozzle man and leaning into him that way. But all you're doing is looking at your exit. You're not helping anybody. If you turn yourself around, you can see what the nozzle man sees. You can anticipate his movement. So a back-to-back position of the nozzle and backup firefighter where they have bottle to bottle, and I see a lot of people train that way because it gives you the ability to give a better support. I won't question that. But you can't anticipate any movements. You might still be pushing when the nozzle man finds a hole in the floor and end up pushing the nozzle man into the hole. So you need to be the face forward, looking around just like the nozzle man is. So now there's the nozzle man set of eyes, your set of eyes, and hopefully the officer's set of eyes. So you have, 3 sets of eyes, looking at what's going on. Hey, Timmy, my backup man's, Timmy, you have another room on fire to the left. I may not have seen it, but my backup fireman did because he's looking the same way and thinking the same things I am.
Okay. Now, if I'm a door firefighter, I think one of the biggest training issues there that I've worked on is just having them, as you said earlier, don't push too much hose. There's got to be ways to know when they need more hose. You really got to be paying attention, don't you?
I like to call the door position the roving linebacker as the line. He backs up the movements of the line. And really the success of that hose line at fires that are distant from the front door, if we have to manipulate the line and get around a couple turns and maybe get into a back bedroom or a kitchen, that door position, that third roving guy in the line becomes extremely important. And he's got to be proactive in his thinking. He can't wait till the nozzle team needs hose and then supply it. That's a delay. We end up getting stuck in doorways, stuck in hallways, stuck in stairways, places we don't want to be. So he's got to anticipate where that nozzle team is going to go, and that comes down to size up, like everybody should be doing on a fire ground. And remember, we've already taken that hose butt and put it up on the front porch. So we know we have 50 feet of hose at the front door. And in my size up, if I look at a Cape-style house, 50 feet of hose should be enough hose to get me anywhere within that house. But what happens is that 50 feet never gets into the house. So the backup firefighter needs to be a little proactive in bringing hose into the house, even when the nozzle team doesn't need it. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And are you a fan of looping the hose too when time permits to store it more neatly, so to say? Well,
so there were always 2 trains of thought about supplying hose, and that's putting that big bowl of hose over your shoulder, and when the nozzle team takes that bowl, you replace it. And that works very well if we're in hallways and stairways. That's when we're going to go vertical with that bowl and replace it. But if I have an area, like you just said, about putting a loop in it, if I can put a loop in the hole in the opposite direction the nozzle team is moving, so if the nozzle team moves in the front door and the fire is going to be down a hallway to the left, and I have a big living room to the right of the doorway, I can take that same 50 feet of hose and put a big loop in that living room, and now they're going to have all the hose they need to get wherever they need in that house. And what else it does, it frees up the door firefighter to never have to come back to that front door again. If he gets what he thinks he needs in the house, in an area, say that living room or a big loop stored, he can come in and manage the hose in the hallway. So, and he never has to run back to the front door to get more hose. He can just go to the living room to get it.
Right.
So
right.
the backup, that door fireman, that roving linebacker, if he keeps the mindset of having the ability to have either an earshot or an eye shot of the nozzle team, then he's going to do his job because he can see them or at least hear what they need. The guys that stay at the front door and keep throwing hose in the house, all they're going to do is fill up that foyer with hose, and they're not going to do the nozzle team any good. But if he brings hose with him as he goes, manageable amounts of hose, 5, 10 feet in a loop, in a roll, or however you want to do it, you're going to maintain that nozzle team is going to have a steady supply of hose to get where that nozzle needs to be. So it's an extremely important position. Okay, and so if he keeps that mindset of being close enough to the nozzle team, not right on top of them, but to be there, at least hear them or see them 10, 15 feet down the hallway, he's going to know what they need and he's going to be ready to supply them with hose because he's already been proactive in his thinking to bring that excess hose, lay it in the living room, lay it up a stairway, put it in the kitchen if they're going, but he has it in the house. He doesn't have to go back to the front yard or, God forbid, all the way back to the apparatus to get it.
Right. Great advice. Great advice from a guy who's been there and done that. And let me ask you, where's the officer go? What are we doing with our officer? Where do you like to see? Where are you when you're making a push?
Well, I like to get a look at the fire area before we get in there. If I can get in and get a couple rooms deep and find out how much fire I have, where the fire is, I like to do that. I'm not a guy that's going to, we call them headhunters. If we have a dedicated truck, my job is to get a line in place. I'm not, they're very capable of doing their search and finding victims. So if I can get in real quick, get a look, but I want to be out there watching what's going on in the hallway, and I'm going to be right next to him. I like to be able to hold my nozzle man. And the reason I like that, if I can keep a hand on his shoulder or on his tank, a couple things. One, he knows I'm there. Okay? But we all know that, especially with the smoothbore nozzle, if we're in tight quarters and we're flowing water, there's a lot of ambient noise. Okay? Just the impact noise, there's just fire noises in general. It's going to be loud in that area. And if I see something and I need him to stop, all I have to do is tug on his mask because I have a hand there already. All I have to do is pull back on it. Or the other way around, if I don't think he's moving quite the way I would like him, I can just lean forward on his without saying, hey, let's go. So I like to be right there. I won't be ahead of the nozzle team. The nozzle man's going to be the first guy. Getting ahead of him is a fool's bet. You're looking to get your helmet blasted off. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to move ahead of my nozzle firefighter, what I'll do, I'll have him shut the line down. We'll let it lift, and I'll say, just wait here. Let me get up and see how much more we have, and then I'll come back and get him. So, but I like to be right next to him.
What do you do when you're making a show up? First of all, I wanted to get to this earlier, and I haven't asked yet, and this is a debate for another day, but your typical room and contents, bread and butter, house fire. It's all pushing dark smoke. There's the hit it hard from the yard mentality. There's the go to the front door mentality. Where does Tim Klett stand on this?
Well, you had to go there, right?
And actually, the phone lines are lighting up now. We're actually getting a couple calls here. So, callers, we will get to you in a second if you can stand by. I'd like to get your answer to this, Tim. If you
well,
what do you base
and I will answer it. Here's my viewpoint on that whole hit it hard from the yard is, and I don't know who came up with the whole thing, and I really don't care, to be honest with you. But that's a tactic that we've been able to do for 100 years. We've always had the ability to give it a dash from the front yard. It's nothing new. It's not new. When the fire conditions dictated us to do that, we did it. We knocked down that fire from the yard, moved in. I don't know who said, "Oh, this is a new wave thing." It was always a weapon we had in our arsenal. Hey guys, this one we got to slow this freight train down. Let's give it a hit from the yard and see what happens, and then we'll get it in. But if I'm dealing with a second floor bedroom fire, my line belongs in that building, and for a lot of different reasons. One is because, people, we do have an obligation to protect people's lives, but there are other people that are going to be in there searching for those people also. Mm-hmm. So there's a time to hit it hard from the yard, and there's a time not to. This isn't new science. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me. And I'm working on an article right now. It's called Breaking Rocks, and it kind of it spoofs on the whole thing in the views of cavemen, but this isn't new. This is the way we've always broken rocks. We've had the ability.
It's just
from the
another
outside,
toal in the back pocket to have available.
Like this whole flow path argument. I mean, we used to call it ventilation. I don't know what you used to call it. And even situational awareness. At one time it was called size up, and before that it was called watch your Buster Brown. So I know people are trying to reinvent the wheel. The one thing would hit it hard from the yard. They're trying to make it a primary tactic, and I don't agree with that. I agree that it is a tactic, and it's a viable tactic. We used to call it a blitz attack. I don't know if you remember that term, Tom.
Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely.
That blitz attack, that's what we used to call it. Hit it hard, hit it fast. It's the same mindset.
But
yeah, it has its place, but it's not a primary tactic in my book. It is when it's needed, but at a bread and butter one-room kitchen fire, it's not. Even if they say everybody's out of the building, to me it's still not a primary tactic. It isn't.
And one question I have for you, Tim, is when you guys do make a push through the front door, is there any advice you can give for it? I'm talking the fire that's pushing black smoke out of many different areas, but there's no visible fire. What should a firefighter, nozzle firefighter, engine crew be looking for to give them signs of where the fire may be? They're going through that front entranceway. They don't know yet if it's a backroom fire. There is just black smoke pushing and seeping throughout this 2.5-story standard residential house. Any tips that you could give on what we should be looking for?
Well, there are training tips. I mean, if I got smoke pushing out every crack of a 2.5-story frame, the first place I'm looking is in the basement. I mean, that's a training tip. That's if I got no visible fire and I got smoke out of every crack, I'm looking in the basement. But if I say I got a 1-story house and I've got that same condition, and I always say it's just going to be one of those fires that come along from time to time. That's going to be a fight. Most of our fires aren't really. We talk about that push. It's not really a push. It's not really a fight. It's the fire's always overmatched. But every once in a while, we get a worthy opponent, if you want to call it that. So one of the things I would do, and this might be one of those fires that requires a dash from the outside, and just an informational gathering dash. Hey, let's give this thing a dash, and let's see what happens with everything else when I put water in the front door. I might be gaining information about where the fire is, how the building's going to react. But one of the key things is if you can get down low enough and look at the lower portions of the room, that smoke will be heading into the direction of the fire at the lower portions of the room. Even though it's belching out black up high, some of those areas might be drawn smoke in at the lower portions of the room, giving you an indication of the direction you need to go. But I will tell you this, if I've got heavy black smoke, I'm probably flowing water from the front door. I'm probably going to listen. It's not your day. We don't know where the fire is. It's hot. It's smoky. This is going to be the fight. We're going to flow water from the front door and then make our push, but we're going to flow the entire way.
You ever hear it to help guide you where it is?
Well, like you can hear it, but like again, just like time on the fire ground, sound becomes very distorted. Time is extremely distorted on the fire ground. But it's funny you bring that up. Is a room in contents, it makes noise, but not a tremendous amount of noise. If you have a loud fire, in my experience, every fire that I've ever had that has been loud, it wasn't a room in contents fire. The fire was into the building. Now I had the problems exacerbated because I had a building fire. So whenever I really had that loud fire, I had fire in the attic above me, I had fire in the walls around me, and you can hear that for sure. There's no question. You hear that. But the bedroom fire, it does make noise. You'll hear stuff falling, you'll hear TVs popping, window mirrors breaking, but it's not tremendously loud. And it does get distorted because sometimes there's other activities going on in the fire ground that cause some of the similar noises. So now, are we making the noise or is the fire making the noise?
Yeah. Hey, we do have a caller on the line. We did have one hang up, and I apologize, caller. If you want to try back, we'll try and get you on for sure. But I do have a caller here from the 773 area code. Let's cue them in here and see what question they may have. Hello, are you with us, caller?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, who we got
here?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Oh, nice to meet you guys. Hey, I'm Mark. I'm a brand new DOD fireman in Texas, and I think the question I have for you guys, you covered nozzlemen and you covered some of the officer things. What advice would you have for a young plugman.
A young what? I'm sorry.
What are you referring to as a plug man? The hydrant guy?
Yes,
a hydrant?
Yes, sir.
Can you do me a favor? What's your first name, man?
Mark.
Mark. Timmy Klett. Nice to talk to you. Just fill me in a little bit on what your duties would be as the plug man. Are you just connecting the hydrant and then you're done for the day and you have coffee?
Yeah. You know, I get a little background for you. I started in Wildland. I was in Wildland for about half a decade, and I just recently came over to Department of Defense. I work for a base in Texas, and you know, it's a little bit of a turnaround because we're not used to having water. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And but from what I've learned, and you know, they sent me to the academy, and I've learned it here. But I'm a jump out guy. I run to the hydrant, you know, flush it, hook it up, or wrap it, hook it up, and then from there go back to the engineer and ask if I need help. But I was just wondering if there's any other kind of take you have on it.
Well, you know, what I would tell you is that, man, I don't know what kind of a set you're using. We used to call it up in Connecticut, we called it a street set. We would drop a street set, we'd wrap it, and what we would do, we'd wrap it and we'd back away. And once the rig got 20 feet away, we could go about our work, because I've actually seen a street set get pulled around a plug and hit a guy.
Yes, sir.
Because the line got stuck in the bed. So I don't know if they've trained you that to wrap it. And I see a lot of guys, they wrap hydrants and then they go right for the steamer connection. And that's the big 4.5.
They trained us not to put our foot on it. They told us, I mean, because we had one guy that...
No, like I would tell you, just wrap, if you're going to wrap the hydrant, step aside, let it do what it wants to do, you know. And you're only giving it a couple seconds, and it's not going to delay you, because wherever that rig is going, it's going to take them time to get there. Believe me, you'll be ready for water before they are. Even if you wait that 5-6 seconds for enough hose to get off the back of the rig, that it's not going to pull that street set off from around the hydrant itself, you know. And then all I can tell you, because I don't know your procedures, is like I told my son today at baseball. It's funny you ask. You know, right now he's in a tough position. He's been kind of riding the pine. And I said, well, be the best at riding the pine. Yeah. And if you're the best at riding the pine and you're the most energetic about riding the pine, you know what? The next thing you know, maybe you'll be in the batter's box and you're the next guy up to go hit.
And you're definitely with that, because, you know, before I even came to this department, I was an engineer, and I think the one good thing about I learned in Wildland is that we actually, you know, we learn to use our equipment in the real scenario, you know, whereas now being on a military base, obviously we don't have a frequency of fire that you would like in a town or a bigger city, you know what I mean? So, and that's, I guess that's the second question I'd have for you is how do you stay sharp when, I mean, like the attitude. You know, you kind of get where I'm going with this.
I know exactly where you're going. It's funny you asked that question, and it's a great question. I mean, it really, and it's, you know what, it really is a question for the ages, because how do you stay sharp? The one thing that we don't control is fires. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I can't say, hey, Mark, next week we're going to go to 2 fires, so be ready. You know, I don't do that. So, and it's very hard to keep myself motivated. And now I'm an officer. I'm in charge of keeping 5 other guys motivated and sharp. And the only way to do that is through drilling. You got to drill. You got to stay sharp. And like you as a wildland fireman, I get it. Like your tool is your best friend, because that's what you had. You know, you had no water yet. So, I mean, a guy like you, I bet you're a tool guy. I can't imagine going to your firehouse and look at your fire truck and seeing any dirty tools. You know?
Yes, sir.
And I think that's the biggest way. Just, you know what, you can't make fires happen, and that's the unfortunate thing.
And when you train, you got to be passionate, and you got to be into it, and you can't just say, we're going to drill tonight, just going to go through the motions. And it's hard. It is, especially sometimes if you're surrounded with people like that. But sometimes passion ignites others.
Yes, sir. And like I'm the rookie, and you know I got a lot of the guys there have been there, you know, 10+ years. I think the second place person's been there 4 years. So, you know, like the when the passion fleets and you're the new guy, it's not like you can really tell everybody how to feel and how to get excited and everything like that.
Yeah, but you can, Mark, you can still test yourself. Do you know what I mean? You can still push yourself.
Yes,
you know
sir.
what I'm saying? I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with you testing yourself, taking a tool out and giving yourself a scenario, you know, or
and Mark, does
writing
the
down,
four-year guy
or going to a previous, huh?
I was going to say, does the 4-year guy have a little more passion too? Or he's not
I
already?
think it just goes with time. And the one thing I never thought I would see is that you got guys 10+ years that like really like have like just don't really want to be there anymore, and like that always tripped me out because I mean I know that in wildland because they're so beat down from the back breaking sharecropping kind of stuff, but like I figured these guys, from what I always saw with the structure side was that it was like the brotherhood and you stick together and you care about it, and I don't know, just kind of changing my view a little bit,
Well,
I feel like that
don't let it beat you though. Don't let it beat you. Don't let it
Let
beat
me give you
you.
a quote. Let me give you a quote from one of my favorite movie stars of all time, John Wayne. He sent a telegram once to a famous female news reporter when she became the first female anchorwoman on a national newscast in the 1970s, and she was taking a beating. And a simple statement was, "Don't let the bastards get you down. Don't let the bastards get you down."
And nothing against them personally. Obviously, they're all great guys. You know what I mean? I think that just the lack of frequency is just kind of, and like you said, you work in Brooklyn and you also work in volunteer, and obviously one probably has a little more frequency than the other. And,
well, first of all, Mark, let me correct. I don't work in Brooklyn. I would never work in Brooklyn. That's 3-digit man. I work in the Bronx. I work
Bronx.
I'm just
Bronx.
kidding. I work in the Bronx.
Oh, I apologize for that. No, I got family. I get you, man. I got family out in Brooklyn and the Bronx actually, so I'll be sure to tell them about that. But no, I just
Mark, it's hard because you become complacent, and that's a term that I always say that's one word that we should never hear in the firehouse, becoming complacent. And there's always something to do. There's always something to learn, whether you're doing it with a group or doing it by yourself. And it's funny, I did a radio show once before with Salka and Lasky, and this same question, and it was from a military fireman also, about how do you motivate people with more time? And you've got an officer that doesn't care, and it's real hard. And, maybe the subtle suggestions, hey, let's go do something today. Can we go look at this building? Something, just go look into the building.
Can you tell me how
it doesn't
school
cost them
works,
anything but time. But just starting to,
and I'm sure they're great guys, and I'm sure they're great guys, and like I said, take a tool up to them. Hey, can you explain how this works, or what did you used to do with this tool, or how did this work? And if that other guy that's been in about 4 years has a little bit of your passion, you start training together, you start doing things together, and maybe they'll take interest in what you're doing. Maybe then they'll come over and give you some tidbits of information, and maybe it'll rekindle a little bit of excitement in them. And it's all small steps maybe that you take.
And I'm betting it would. You get a tool out and you're going over it, and someone's liable to walk by and maybe just have a story about the tool. We used this one day. We had this happen here, and this is how we used it, and that's how it starts.
Yeah.
And then, hey, can you tell me about this tool?
And Mark, one other thing back, if you wouldn't mind with the hydrant, I have one more thing, and Tim, I mean, you got more experience than any of us, so if I'm speaking out of line here. I've always been taught, in my experiences, don't ever underestimate the importance of flushing that hydrant thoroughly and all the way. And you do it slowly, correct, Tim? I think it was Chief Salka that taught me that.
Yeah.
I
mean, do you know why you flush a hydrant slow, Mark?
No, I actually have never heard that before, but I'm curious.
Okay, so what happens is and you probably don't have it, but because in the city we do, they're actually, they're garbage cans, the hydrants are. But if they throw something in there and you charge it fast, whatever in there will get jammed up into the bonnet, above the outlet, above the, the connection.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So you charge the hydrant slow, so if there's anything in there, paper or anything, as the water rises, it flows out the opening, and that's how it. And then once everything that's like on the top of the water flows out, you can open it up all the way and really flush the hydrant good. But if you open it all the way right away, if there is stuff in that hydrant, a can, a bottle, paper, an old toy, it gets jammed up above the outlets into the bonnet, and then but the chance of it now being when you connect to your apparatus getting sucked in through that line is increased. So that's why they're open slow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
in the cold weather, it doesn't get cold in Texas, but we only open them, and if we hear water, we shut it down.
So definitely, open it slowly. That's a good
one.
Open
it slowly, yeah. Just, and you'll see the water will come up. You'll hear the water coming up. You hear the sound it makes a distinct noise as it starts pushing the air out of that hydrant. And you'll see water get to the I don't know how your hydrant is set up, if there's 3 outlets, 2 outlets, or 1. But you'll just let the water flow out. Okay, and once it's flowing out, there's nothing on top of that water. There's nothing floating, no garbage. You can give it a good flush.
Well, I like
and
that.
Tom,
That's
you're absolutely right.
There.
That's how you do it. You flush the hydrant.
Don't ever underestimate the importance, and don't try and take a shortcut and not do it. It's always you could save yourself. It's the little things. It's another one of the little things that is important to be done and done correctly. And it's
well, and another thing is also, if you're not going to take all the caps off, if there's more than one connection, make sure they're tight. If the ones you aren't going to take off, make sure they're tight. Because when you do eventually open it all the way, I've seen them blow right off and take out guys' knees. So if you're only going to flush it via one of the openings, if there's multiple openings, make sure the other caps are tight, or they can potentially blow off and hurt you.
That happened to one of our firefighters a year ago.
What do you guys use in the Bronx? Do you guys use the Quick Connect, or is it all with threads, like NH threads?
It's all threads. It's all New York City Fire Department threads. Yep. And we don't really lay in. New York doesn't lay in. The pumper goes right to the hydrant.
Okay, but what about when you go to the pumper? Do you it's still thread, or
it's all thread? We have some Quick Connects. They're using the Quick Connects now for the satellites and a couple of the hose wagons that are out on the airports. But the line companies, we do have a Quick Connect inlet for our we have a new connection for drafting, and that's a Quick Connect.
Okay, I got you. And the fire department at the airport, is that all under New York, or is that a private, or is that through the airport?
The both airports in New York City have the Port Authority Fire Department, and then what will come, and we do have hose wagons that respond to those that can bring our water from the street out to the runways. That's why they carry the 5-inch Quick Connects. The satellite.
I got you.
But they're under the jurisdiction of the Port Authority Fire Department.
They hire through like our DOD, all the certs like that, or are they all through New York?
I would be wrong to give you an answer on that because I'm not really sure where those firefighters come from. They're not through the FDNY test. The Port Authority PD is a different test from the New York City PD, so it might very well be a PD. Like a fire department test for the Port Authority also, because they have Port Authority fire trucks that cover the bridges. Like the George Washington Bridge has its own fire truck.
Yeah. And
it's run by the Port Authority.
And Tim, even in Wildland, I know that like Staten Island has their own Wildland Fire Department, like through the federal government. I even applied to it twice. I wanted to come out there because my family lives out there, but. I didn't know what the hell they do out there.
Well, there's big brush fires in Staten Island. They have big brush fires. They're not really like forest fires, but it's all brush. It's all marsh. But they have this time of year there'll be a 5th alarm in the next 2 weeks of a brush fire. Every year they have them. Yeah, every year they have them. A couple of times they've had really really bad brush fires out there that took numerous homes. Yeah.
Oh no, not. I'm sorry, not Staten Island. I mean Ellis Island, like Statue of Liberty.
Oh, but Ellis Island's tiny. There's no.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like they actually have a federal department for.
It's a federal. I would guess it's because it's governed by the federal government. It's actually
probably
whether it's in New York or New Jersey is the argument, but.
Yeah, the parties own it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and there's also the other Governor's Island might have that too. Governor's Island was part of the federal government also.
Oh yeah, that's actually I've seen that. That's where they do like those burn tests, right? With the
they did some of the
aprons
tests there, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I got
some
Mark,
of the flow path.
Mark, I just want to say, you just keep up the good work that you're doing, and keep up the passion that you have, and be like he said, be the best you can be, and it is contagious. And there'll be somebody coming in the door behind you someday, and just remember how you feel and how you want it to be, and make sure that happens for whoever comes in the door behind you.
Yes, sir. Hey, thank you guys very much for your time. It was very nice to talk to you.
All right, Mark, thanks for the call.
Thank you very much, Mark, for calling in, brother.
All right.
Really appreciate you calling in, brother.
Yeah, you take care.
You take care. Thanks. Hey, Tim, I know it's we're going on 2 hours here, and I just, if you don't mind, I just have a couple more questions. Or you got a few more minutes, or how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Okay, good. I think I got enough information that we didn't get to that I'm gonna. It may take us another year and a half. I'm gonna get you back on if that's okay.
That's fine. This was a year in the making as it was. So.
But there's so much more we could talk about, and I have so many more questions. But there's a couple I still want to get to, and the first one is the attached garage fire. What's Lieutenant Klett doing? Are we going in the front door of the house first? Are we knocking it down from the outside first, or doing both at the same time? What are you recommending?
You got some pretty good questions. Well, here's the thing: is that the first line's true obligation is to protect the primary means of egress for the occupied spaces of the home. Simply put, that line should be advanced to the front door. Should it ignore the garage fire? Absolutely not. I mean, that's, if you have a fully involved garage fire, you've got to slow it down. It cannot not be attended to, but eventually that line needs to get to the occupied portions of the house. And in a volunteer fire department where multiple lines might be delayed, well, then the line getting to the front door might be delayed. You just cannot not ignore a fully involved attached garage. The one good thing about those is that that door between the house and the garage is normally a fire-rated door, so it'll buy you some time from fire getting into the occupied spaces. But most times that's never a problem. It usually gets in via the unoccupied spaces, the attic space or the crawl space above it. It usually gets into the house itself. But my view is that, again, our obligation is to protect life before property. And that's why I like getting that line as soon as I possibly can to the occupied portions of the house to protect anybody in there in the searches. With that being said, we cannot ignore the fire to do that. So if we have to spend some time in the garage, knock it down, put a good hit on it, and then, hopefully that by that time there's another engine or there's more guys there and you can get a second line. That first line should go finish up in the house. And hopefully the second line taken is a bigger line, hopefully the 2.5, because you are dealing with a large body of fire.
Great.
And the combustibles within the garage, you probably have cars and fuels and then all kinds of other stuff, paint. So it does scream a bigger line. So the second line should
never
be
know what you're going to find in those.
Bigger than the first line.
Like an attic. You don't know what you're going to find in a garage.
I'm just working on something now for the state chiefs on attic fires.
Okay. And then another question. I want to spend more time on this, and that's why we're going to have another show. But tell me about the 2.5. I love the 2.5. My department trains heavily with the 2.5, and I tell everyone I'm a little guy. All right, I'm a tiny little guy, but I love the 2.5, and I love to be the one demonstrating how to use it, because you don't have to be the 6'4" firefighter if you're doing it correctly. But when are we using the 2.5? And tell me about your feeling on training with the 2.5.
Well, first of all, 2.5, we use that adults, advanced fire. Mm-hmm. You got to get me in the brain part here. Advanced fire.
Defensive operations.
Unable to locate. Tons of water.
Large.
Standpipes, right?
Standpipes, yep.
So basically advanced fire. What's an advanced fire? That's your attached garage, right? Mm-hmm. So, you're basically is when you want big water, big hit. Big water, fast. That's your advanced fire. Defensive operations, that's a bunt. we've got to fully involved. We just want to put as much water as we can in this place. It doesn't mean that we can't, they have that whole transitional viewpoint. Another thing that we've been doing for 100 years. This new transitional attack. Really, you never were inside a house that got pulled out and then you hit it? That's the same thing, Mm-hmm. But the big thing for me with the 2.5 is when we go to the 2.5, we need big water. So, and we're talking commercial buildings. If you go to a commercial building, we should be going at that, with big water. You're going to a church, you should bring in the 2.5. I mean, you're going in undergunned simply because of fire load within those buildings. You don't bring a knife to a gunfight. So, and the mindset is a big thing for me with the 2.5. We have to think about our mindset. If we need the big line and big water, our fire problem is what? We have a big fire problem. And whenever we have a big fire problem, our mindset should be a slow-down approach. And that works very well when it comes to the 2.5. Because the 2.5 absolutely, without question, forces us to slow down a little bit. Now, the 2.5 offers us a lot that makes up for the speed and mobility of the inch and 3/4. And one of them is gallons per minute, right? Every 3 minutes, we're going to double the amount of water we can put out than with the inch and 3/4. Reach, penetration, all those things with the 2.5. So we might be a little bit slower, but all those other things are making up for that. There's a huge misconception in the fire service that the 2.5 is that big bad beast that we can't use anymore. They went to 2-inch hand lines and they're putting out just as much water, and they've kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. Now it's still the inch and 3/4 and the 2.5. But the 2.5 truly is the only line in the fire service that doubles as a supply line and an attack line. There's no other. It's a very, very versatile line that we should be using. And like you said, you're a small guy. If you're using the 2.5 the right way, anybody can do it. I was just at the Orlando Fire Conference. Well, like I said, we were just at the Orlando Fire Conference, and the way I teach how to use the 2.5, we had a 15-year-old explorer, female, with another guy push the 2.5 flowing water for 40 feet through a maze.
Awesome.
And she did it. And
great.
And here it is, simply put. When you're using the 2.5, your mindset should be a slow-down approach with little victories. With the inch and 3/4, it's built for speed and mobility. We need you to get in and get good water on the seat of the fire as quickly as possible. If we have 2 rooms burning, we only want to lose 2 rooms. That's the inch and 3/4. With the 2.5, we have a big fire problem, so we're going to move 5 feet, 6 feet at a time. Stop, operate the nozzle, try to gain some more information on what's going on. You ready? Move another 5, 6 feet. If we need to gate the nozzle a hair to make that little advance, and use the building. Get yourself in a doorway. Get yourself against, and use the doorway of the refrigerator as a support. The backup firefighter should pin that line to the floor once he gets in the doorway or against the table or a couch. He's going to open the nozzle fully again, and he's going to spend some time. While he's moving that nozzle around, he's looking for another place of operation. Okay, there's another chair. Let's move over there. So if you think of it like this, win the doorway, win the hallway, win the room, win the fight. That's how the 2.5 should go, those small little victories.
Here again with what you talked about earlier, the 2.5 is when I see a lot of training focusing on the backup firefighter having their back to the nozzle firefighter. I see that a lot. Are you saying that still we should be looking forward? Do you think that's still the best practice even with the 2.5? You're pinning it to the floor, but you're looking forward?
Positionally, I don't think their positions change. I don't think my experience has shown me that a shoulder into the back. If I can get my shoulder into the nozzle man's shoulder blade, he's going to be fine. I don't need to put bottle to bottle.
Okay. And pin it to the
and
floor.
Remember,
let friction. I was going to say, and pin it. The backup firefighter's pinning that line to the floor, and you try to get that line a little
once
straight
he stops
behind
his
him.
movement to flow, he'll pin that line to the floor behind him. But he's not going to need any help. If the nozzle man gets into a good, solid position, say a doorway or against a refrigerator, he's got to find something. With the 2.5, you cannot get out into the middle of the room. You're going to fail. And the other thing we have to remember with the 2.5, when we turn the nozzle, you have to turn your body. You cannot turn the line like to do the 1 3/4. Right? We talked about whipping that nozzle around earlier.
Yep.
If we try to whip that nozzle or like turn the line to the hard left to get a side room with the 2.5, it's going to kink about 1.5 feet behind the nozzle. And that kink is a very serious kink because it's a very violent kink. When you whip the line to make the turn, it'll kink, and then it'll drive away from your body, and when you lose control of the nozzle, the kink straightens itself out. And we lose control of the 2.5 that way. So whenever we make our turns, we got to remember that line is going to be turned with our bodies, and with the nozzle too. That the nozzle and our body have to turn. We just can't take that line and whip it over because it'll kink.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up kinks again because again that was on my list to talk about, and I just want to reinforce and tell me if what I've learned over the years is correct or incorrect or you change it, but nobody walks by a kink. It's everybody's responsibility to straighten a kink out.
Absolutely, without question. I'm more laid back about kinks. Like I say, kinks in our hand lines are only an issue when we're flowing water. And we have to remember that. We can't get so wrapped up in chasing kinks that we forget to advance the line. How many times you've been on a front porch waiting to advance into a front door, and there's 2 or 3 kinks right there on the front porch, and guys, the backup guy will go, let me get these kinks before we move. And I say, let's move, and the kinks will work themselves out. So we can't get over-fixated on our kinks in our hand lines. And in my experience, the kinks that put hand lines out of service or cause that big are within earshot or eyeshot of the nozzle team. They never happen in the front yard. That line out there is stagnant. It's not really moving. If there's no kinks in that front lawn when we start, one isn't going to develop out there. It's only going to develop in the areas where we're moving the line, and that's going to be between that roving linebacker and the nozzle team itself. Anything behind him really isn't getting moved that much. It's more stagnant. So those kinks are going to be manageable kinks. And again, I tell all young firefighters, in a smoky condition, you should know 2 key ways to figure out you got a kink. One, you should hear it, right? Having the ability to see what you hear, you'll hear that kink, especially when they're flowing water. And the other one is more of a vibration in the hand line. The hand line will vibrate a little bit when they're flowing, but if it's really vibrating, you got a kink somewhere. It shouldn't be, a real shaky vibrate. If you have a real shaky vibrate in a line, you have a kink somewhere. And if you just run your hand, if it starts to go away, you're moving the wrong direction. Go the other way, you'll find a kink.
You just brought up another good point. Again, we could talk all night about this. I'm a pump operator. I'm a chauffeur, engineer, whatever you call it. Is there a way to tell if when you have an emergency, if it's a kink versus a burst line?
That's a pretty good question. I mean, if you have flow meters, your flow meters could dictate, a kink because you're not putting out, if they're flowing water, and your flow meter starts up. But I don't know if there's a way. I mean, you might have me on this one. If there's a way to tell.
I was thinking like if it's a kink, your pressure may spike. And if the nozzle firefighter says they've got the nozzle open... Well, your pressure might spike and your flow might go down, though. So that's why I said that if you have a flow meter, you might get a spike in your pressure and a decrease in your flow meter, and that might dictate it, indicate you have a kink somewhere. But a break in the line, you get a break in the line, your flow meter might skyrocket too. If it's a severe break, your flow meter might increase. If you're flowing at 180, your pump is right, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, now I'm flowing 250. And they haven't said a word, and maybe the pressure's even dropping now. Your flow goes up, and you might have a break pressure
somewhere.
Would drop. Your pressure might drop, and if you didn't have a flow meter and your pressure's dropping, and they're saying they're flowing water, there's a good chance maybe you got a burst line. I'm thinking, but again, that'd be a subject for another show. Is engineer emergencies.
It's been a long time since I drove a fire truck.
Well, I tell you, I can't thank you enough for coming on tonight. I hope we covered some important items for our listeners out there. I think we did, and I know there's many more we talk about. And there's two last things to end up here. I was going to start this way, and I didn't, so we'll end this way with you. You mentioned earlier little things that can make a big difference, and I don't know if this is the right way to phrase it, but I'll phrase it this way, and if it needs to be changed, change it. But in your experience, both career, paid, and volunteer, what are some of the little things that maybe in the volunteer ranks we're not doing right or focusing on enough or can't be emphasized enough when it comes to good, solid engine firefighter responsibilities, duties, and ways of doing things?
That's a hard question. I mean, you might broach a subject that some people might not want to hear, but I think we could use specific words like confidence. I think confidence is a big thing in the volunteer side, because in the volunteer side they don't do it a lot. But yeah, I think through training and education and knowing if you have confidence, I always felt that when I had a nozzle in my hand, there was nothing I couldn't do. I never felt there was a fire I couldn't put out. Never felt that I couldn't put it out. And I'm not saying everybody should have that level of confidence, but I think that confidence through training, through good officers, is a key, especially at the volunteer level. Do you know what I mean? Because you might be the only guy. You might be the one. That's it. If you're not doing it, nobody else is. So I think confidence is a big thing. And I think that the volunteers are limited in I think that some of the mandated training that they're mandated to get now has taken them away from, like once a month we have to do OSHA checks here. And, it's a night that could be spent on other things that are more viable to what these guys have to do every night, when they're called at 2 o'clock in the morning. But I think, like, training and confidence and just being proficient in knowing your apparatus, knowing what you have, knowing, the limitations of yourself and the apparatus and your tools, I think is a big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And with training comes that confidence that you talked about. If we're not fighting fires regularly, weekly, daily, whatever it is, we're getting them in frequently, then training's the only way we're going to be better prepared for when it does happen. And I believe it was Mike Lombardo that said this. The longer it's been since your last fire, the closer you are to your next fire. So training will make you ready and will make you better prepared. And I got one last thing I was hoping you would cover quickly, even though it has nothing to do with engine ops. One of my favorite pieces that you ever wrote is the 4 ups. And they can certainly be applied to the volunteer ranks as well as any career or paid rank. I wrote that a long time ago. And I still have it. I happen to have a copy right in front of me, and if you wouldn't mind just spending a second on each of the sections of, first one is listen up.
Well, I mean, I think that, listen up speaks for itself. If you're the new guy, and nobody says you have nothing to say, but you have very little to say. And listen up is listen to those old guys sitting around and talking, the dinosaurs. And even when I was a young volunteer, I used to, those guys, they forgot more than I'll ever know, those guys. And believe me, they have a lot to say. So, if you're new, just sit around and listen up. I mean, you're going to talk when you need to talk, but spend more time listening than you do talking. My father always used to say, and not to be rude, he goes, it's better to be thought of as an ass than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And I think that kind of sums that up. Just when you're new, you do more listening than you do talking.
And the second one is clean up.
Again, kind of one that speaks for itself. You're the new guy. Whether it's a career or a volunteer, you're still the new guy. And the one thing about the fire service that I love, that I think is that makes us who we are, that separates us from the PD, from the civilian world, from the corporate world, for any other thing, is that everybody that's ever walked through the doors of a firehouse as a new guy was asked to clean up. He was the bottom of the totem pole and worked his way up. There's no discrimination. I'm not picking on you. Everybody that came in before you was asked to do the exact same stuff.
Mm-hmm. And the third one, step up.
Well, again, it's step up. Become a good member of your volunteer fire department. You know, if they be involved, show up for drills, show up for parades, show up for picnics, show up on work duties. You know, and I know that life gets in the way, and you have the hockey tickets, and no one would ever ask you not to give that up. But you know, you're doing nothing around the house, and they put out a tone that they're having a work detail to clean the rigs. Show up, step up, be involved, be part of that company, be part of that tradition. You know.
And then the favorite, number 4, shut up.
Again, that kind of like reinforces the first one. You know what? Most times you're gonna get yourself in trouble by opening your mouth. Just be quiet. Just shut up. Mm-hmm. Just shut up and do what you're told to do. And then someday, again, that's because of everything we've ever done in the fire service. Someday we call them the senior man. You know, and they're very powerful people in the firehouse, even in a volunteer place. You know, I always say that the senior guy in a volunteer firehouse, when he finally decides to give it up and he's going to stop being a true active volunteer, his only hope is that firehouse or that fire company is in the same shape it was when he became the senior member. Mm-hmm. That the traditions were there. You know what I mean? The traditions were there, and everything that they did that made them separate, made them different from all the other volunteer companies around, are still in place. And that's what the guy that has to shut up someday, because of the beauty of the fire service, he will be that guy too. He will be that guy too. And then he won't have to shut up anymore.
4 ups, 4 great
the 4
things.
Ups of being, it's the 4 ups of being an upbeat probie.
And they can be applied to the professional volunteer fire department so well.
Absolutely.
Tim, I can't thank you enough. This went much longer than I thought. I hope you're not ready to kill me. I hope
Not
you're
at all.
okay.
Not at all. I enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me on. I hope your listeners enjoyed it as much as I did.
And we barely scratched probably the surface of things we could talk about. In all seriousness, we will talk more, and we'll talk down the road about setting it up again.
We didn't talk about size up or anything, you know.
I know, size up, and I wanted to get into basement fires, and I wanted to get into so many other things. And listen, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, if somebody wanted to pick your brain, had questions for you, wanted you to come in and help train them, anything like that, can you tell people how to best get a hold of you?
Yeah, that would definitely be through my email address would be the best way to get a hold of me. That's ENG88TK@gmail.com. So it's a pretty simple email address, ENG88TK@gmail.com.
Oh, fantastic. So there you have it.
Even people. I can remember that.
And they're an engine guy.
Yeah,
you got to say that for the truckies out there, right?
Yeah. They're probably already all fast asleep. I got a couple. I just can't tell them on the radio.
Oh, all right. I'll have to get those from you because I like to tell them.
Well, you've always heard the one why truck guys cut holes in the roof, right?
Oh, why's that?
So they can look down and see the real firemen doing their jobs.
Oh, Jesus. You know what? We're going to get Ciampo on next or something to do a truckie show.
Yeah, well, if you want to put people to sleep, that's good. You can do that.
Oh, here we go. There go Mary. Look out. Hey, listen, Tim, thank you so very much for being on tonight. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I learned a lot, and I have more questions, and we'll talk again soon. And
absolutely.
And thank you so much. And I got just a couple things I got to finish up with here, but say goodbye to you now, and thanks so very, very much.
All right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Tom.
Absolutely, my friend. Take care.
All right. Take care and be safe.
You too, brother. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Just a great show here. 2 hours talking good, solid engine work and engine ops and responsibilities of the engine firefighter, and so much more to talk about. As he said, we didn't even get to talk about size up, and I wanted to talk about basement fires and some other things. So we'll get him back on. And be watching. I will be having an article come out in Fire Engineering in the near future. I'm still putting it together, but I am doing one on the basics of Engine Firefighter responsibilities for the volunteer firefighter. And as always, thank you to Wright Rescue Systems for sponsoring the show. I can't wait to check out their system at this year's FDIC, but we're so grateful to them for continuing to step up and sponsor these Fire Engineering Talk radio shows.
Created and designed by firefighters, a rapid intervention device like no other, used to remove an unconscious firefighter from an IDLH, the Patriot Rat. You can find us at wrightrescuesystems.com.
Excellent, and I just want to end on our shout-out of the month. Shout-out of the show. Every show we end up with a shout-out to a volunteer fire company or a volunteer firefighter for doing something exceptional or for being exceptional or being recognized for something. And tonight's shout-out comes from the Fire Reaches of Tennessee to a company called Seymour Volunteer Fire Department. Somebody said something very nice about them in response to a house fire that they responded to a few months back. And there's 711 fire departments in the great state of Tennessee, and out of those, 554 are volunteer. And the Seymour Volunteer Fire Department is one of those 554 volunteer companies. They operate in 3 counties. They have 6 stations. They cover 102 square miles, and they're dispatched by 3 different 911 centers. They have around 65 firefighters. They answer about 1,800 emergency calls last year alone. Well, they had a house fire, like we all have house fires, and they went about and did the job, and they must have done a stupendous job because the resident who was assisted said it best. They might be volunteers, but they're professionals as far as I'm concerned. Way to go, Seymour Volunteer Fire Department, for exemplifying the professional volunteer firefighter and fire department spirit. That is awesome, and we recognize you tonight and say thank you, job well done. They might be volunteers, but they're all professionals as far as I'm concerned, is what the residents said. Folks, thanks again for listening in tonight. The next show I will be doing will be coming live from FDIC on Thursday of FDIC week, and then I will be back the quarter after that. Thank you for everyone that's reached out to me on Facebook. Remember the Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page or my own personal page. Thanks for tuning in, and just remember always that being professional has absolutely nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service and taking care of not just our customers, but our members as well. Thank you very much for listening in, and we will be talking to you again shortly from FDIC. Stay safe, everybody. God bless.